Well, then I will call this special meeting, aka work session, to order for the Board of Commissioners on this Monday, August 19th, a little after 4 o'clock. First on the agenda this afternoon is Chandler Thanks with our tourism marketing presentation. Welcome back. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Fantastic.
You and your team?
Right. Those that don't. Some are new for me. My name is Steve Chandler. I've been here a gazillion times, it feels like now. I think I'm starting to know locals.
Right.
It's
Heard you
nice.
met Dennis down at the local haunt.
Right, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're excited to be here today. As you all know, we embarked on an effort to evaluate what's the right way that we need to be branding all of Currituck County for tourism. So I stress tourism, of course, because everyone's well aware of the dynamics that go along with our county. See, I use "our" as my words because I'm so much a part of you guys now. We're so thankful for all the financial revenues and stuff that come in, of course, over from Kerala and that area. But there's also a lot of things that you all are thinking about every day as it relates to this side of things too. And so we have to have all that in mind. And as you know, we went through a lot of research, and we've been doing a lot of research in the last 3 months. Just as a quick background, in case you don't know, the strategic plan you all have been operating on for the last 7 years, we did that about 7 years ago. So we're pretty well versed in visitor research, in tourism research for you all. So this isn't just our first little project with you. And I want to emphasize something that I think is really important. And then I'll turn it over to Greg to share with you, not only remind you of the research that I think he was here a few months ago presenting the research to you, but the most important thing, how are we going to do this? Like, what do we need to do? And the most important thing is, what do we call ourselves? And that's what we're going to present our recommendation to you all today. Okay. But I want to remind you of something. Branding is one of those words. It deserves the dirty word that it gets sometimes, in my opinion, because people think it's always about promotion and beating our chest and being bigger and better. And sure, sometimes it is. It's also, and I've done this 147 different times, by the way, in the last 17 years. That's my context of this comment. Branding is just as much about preservation. It's making sure we maintain what's important to our community and to those that we serve, and making sure that what makes it so appealing and so valuable doesn't erode and go away. And this project is just as much about that as it is promoting. Being bigger and better isn't always the goal. We want to maintain what's so valuable to all of us. And so I want to pass that along to you all, because I think it's important. From what I know of the people of this community, I think that's really important. So anyway, I'll let Greg. I think I can hear him. I think he's talking to AV person. So anyway, I just flew into town.
Right.
There he is. You ready?
Well, they were trying to get.
It's ready to go. Hit play.
Can you see it there?
Yeah.
It's not full screen, but
Hit the
it's,
magic button. There you go.
There you go.
You're good to go.
I should. Okay, great. Well, it's good to see most of you again. Those who I haven't met, hello. I've been back as not quite as much as Steve, but quite a bit, and going through this process. And it's been an exciting process. One of the things that Steve kind of covered a lot of that, but there were some key questions that we had to ask ourselves going through this branding process. Is what differentiates Currituck County from the other places in the Outer Banks? The Outer Banks is a huge brand. And so what differentiates us? There's a lot of competition that's there. So we decided that was one of our key questions that we went through, even when we did strategic planning, is what makes us special? And then when we get into the branding, what does that look like? And
here you go.
there it goes. So what we did was we went out and talked to folks. We did a lot of research. Steve touched on that a little bit. And what that research included was residents, stakeholders, which you were involved with, and visitors, as well as people who really know the place. When you look at stakeholders and residents, what are people saying on both sides? We have two different places. We have the coast side and the mainland side. So what were people saying? What we did a fam tour. We've seen the place many times, but it's ever changing. Every time we come back, there's something new that's here. But we did a fam tour. We did a lot of one-on-one interviews, which you were a part of. We had 13 focus groups, which was a total of about 40 people that were involved in those groups. Then we did the resident tourism sentiment study. That was a key study for us because we needed to understand how residents viewed tourism and what they saw as the Outer Banks. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But we had 466 residents participate. Then we went and did an outside perception study. That outside perception study we had 312 people. Those were people who had been there within a 75-mile radius of Currituck County. So it wasn't necessarily, we just went to different places in North Carolina all around to understand how they viewed us. And then the last one was a visitor perception study. We did inquiry records, and we did just a random sample of visitors in your key markets, or of people in general population in your key markets, is what, if they visited, what was their experience? Where do they consider the Outer Banks? That's a key question to ask.
I think some of our people were also, in that study, included people who visit and stay in Kitty Hawk.
Yeah. In the outer, they had to visit the Outer Banks. Let me clarify that. They say they visit the Outer Banks. Where, then we asked the question, where did they stay? Some of them could have been Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, and other places. Some were Corolla, Corova. So when you look at that, then we did the digital audit, looking at what you look like. Then after we did all the research, we kind of put things together, and we came back about 2 months ago, roughly, and did a name and kind of strategy testing. We kind of, some of the people that we had talked to prior came back, and we just showed them we're going to show you what we showed them, but to get feedback to say, are we on the right track? And that's where we feel like we've landed with this. So that was the research piece of this. It's very extensive, and so you'll see what we came out. So what happens, what does the research say? I'm not going to go through all the research. I was here a while back. Some of you were a part of that, and it just went away again. But one of the things that happens is, did you lose everything?
Yep.
One of the things that happens is with that, when you look at, we boil everything down to brand truths. I won't bore you with all the research that we did from all those different places, but we came up with 6 brand truths. That those are the undeniable things that we use to help develop the brand as we move forward. So I'll go through what those are real quick. And the first one is, the Outer Banks has unparalleled name recognition. There's no question about that. People all over know the Outer Banks. As a tourist destination, what makes it well known is you get to Nags Head, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills. When people think of the Outer Banks, that's where they go. They might think of Hatteras a little bit, but that's kind of, that area is where people's mind generally goes to. The second brand truth we have is that Dare County claims the Outer Banks. It's our neighboring county. They claim the Outer Banks. As a tourism brand, most often excludes things in Currituck County, including Corolla and Corova. And just so you know, on their website, they say the end of the Outer Banks is Duck. It says that on there. It says the last town in the Outer Banks is Duck. We know that we're a part of the Outer Banks, but that's one of the things that they say. That was a brand truth. The other is Corolla is considered kind of upscale and less crowded. When you look at the landscape of the Outer Banks, there's a lot of beach destinations. What differentiates ours? We ask that. It tends to be less crowded, and it's more upscale compared to some of the other areas. So again, these brand truths are really trying to help us differentiate who we are from as the organization and how we promote ourselves here in Currituck. And then we provide these experiences beyond the beach. We are fortunate where we have the beach and the mainland. So there's 2 distinct different tourism opportunities here that we found, and people see that. One of the things that we have is, I think it's your term that we were given the first time we were here, is that when people get crispy, they're looking for something else to do. They want to get away from the water and go do something else. Well, we offer some of those opportunities with the water park and Digger's Dungeon and the farm markets. So we have those opportunities for people. And one of the things that we found is a lot of the visitors that are going to Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, and those places are coming up here in the mainland to experience some things that we have on the mainland side as well. And going to obviously going over to the lighthouse, wellhead, and going up to the 4x4 area and those type places. But we are a part of that experience as well, and we have to remember that. The fifth one is that, you know, our Currituck mainland, it expands the tourism opportunity in Currituck County. It's more, yes, we have the Golden Goose with Corolla and Corova. That's where people, they want to go to the beach. But having the mainland really expands that opportunity for us. And you can't get to those places without going through the mainland. You know, coming on the highway there, like it or not, traffic or not, you have to come through us to get to the beach side. And also with that on the mainland side, it offers the golf. It offers, you know, there's activities with the parks and the equestrian and all of those different things, and the farm markets and the breweries and the wineries. And then the last one is, you know, for many stakeholders, the Outer Banks experience begins at some point in the planning process. This was a question we asked because we went to your neighbors and we went to those who, they could be in Ohio, Pennsylvania, they were visitors here, is where does that experience begin? Internally, a lot of folks said that experience begins at the bridge. That's when it begins the Outer Banks. That's what started our thought process. Let's ask those who are coming in. A good number of people who are visitors here from out of state consider the Outer Banks experience begins when they cross the state line. So coming in from Virginia, they cross the state line, that experience begins. There was also a good number of them that says, you know what, our experience begins at our house when we're leaving to go there. We're like, oh, okay. So that you begin to look at that. The big piece of that is when they begin to see the water. When you cross over, you can see some water fairly early in. It's not the ocean, it's the sound, but they still realize they're in the Outer Banks. And that was key for us to understand where that experience begins. Because if they have to come all the way down to the bridge, it's a different story, but their experience begins, it's far broader than that and much different than what we had thought in the beginning. So with that, with those brand truths, we kind of narrowed those down and said, okay, what's our strategy? What's this strategy going to be? And that strategy is that we've got to carve out and claim ownership to our section of the Outer Banks. We have to claim ownership. If you remember what I said, that Dare County in their materials, the Outer Banks kind of ends. What they've said is it kind of ends at Duck. There's a big piece that's past that's ours. So we've got to claim it and own it as we move forward with the branding. And make sure that that includes Corolla, Corova, the mainland, Knott's Island, that it's all inclusive to what we have in the tourism experience that we offer. So, what others are saying about this is, what we're going to show you, people are already saying it as we look through.
Yeah, so again, looking at the research, first of all, it's natural. You know, these are just a couple of articles. You can Google and find this quite easily. Several examples, but there are a lot of people that speak of the Northern Outer Banks. This starts off Elizabeth City as the gateway to Northern Outer Banks. We know that's not Currituck, of course, but Corolla cozies up to the Virginia state line at the northernmost end. So it's very directional. There is a direction to the Outer Banks. Why? Because it's a vertical place, right? There is a north to it and a south to it. I like the competitive challenge that we found out with Dare. They don't include. Hey, they've done a great job. They've done a fantastic job. They drew their line. Look at their maps. If you're not familiar, their maps of the Outer Banks stop at Duck. You think that's it?
Well, the Earth's flat.
What's that?
The Earth's flat.
I was just
You're
thinking-
driving.
Right. That's it. You're driving off. Columbus got it wrong.
Monsters.
Of course, you all know this because this is a local business, right? There's the Northern Outer Banks Brewing Company, so they're giving themselves an advantage, or they're trying to market themselves. Why? Because they need people to know where they are. It's very functional, right? We're the northern part of it. There's a lot of Outer Banks to it. They need people to know if you want to go to this brewery, it's this side of the Outer Banks. So they're already doing that. North Carolina Lighthouses Museum, let's see, this is the OBCInc.com. right? Climb for rewarding views of the Currituck Sound, Atlantic Ocean, and Northern Outer Banks. It's there. We were in a couple of groups, and people started referring to the Northern Outer Banks, actually. I was actually speaking to a commissioner, and someone with them in our interview, in the meeting, referenced to us as the Northern Outer Banks. So it's natural. Look at this. I think you've heard of Brindley and Twitty. I'm pretty sure y'all probably heard of those folks, right? Whether you're looking, this is off their website. And by the way, just a reminder, Brindley and Twitty do business more than Currituck County too. They do quite a bit of business in Dare County. So they love everybody. They just have to love us all differently. Is a neat way of looking at it. And here's what their website says. Whether you're looking for a location in the Northern OBX, listener shopping, dining, entertainment, blah, 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 right? And then Twitty does the same thing. Twitty and Company has over 550 Corolla vacation rentals on the OBX, each of which leads access to this tranquil yet spirited coastal community in the Northern Outer Banks. I promise you, Twitty doesn't call Kill Devil Hills tranquil.
Right.
Right? Right? So it's already in the vernacular. We even went to Chat GPT. Now, we probably don't even care about AI. We'll just make it amusing if nothing else, okay? But if you don't understand AI, how it works, it doesn't just make stuff up. It actually scours the internet, educates itself based on whatever you've asked it to do, and then tells you what it found. That's kind of the easy way of explaining it. So we ask it to tell us about Currituck County, and I mean, this is what it says. Primarily encompasses the northernmost parts of the Outer Banks. It's being very directional. It's trying to distinguish us from the rest of Outer Banks, right? We're the northernmost part of it. And even Dare County is the southern part. So even it wants to separate us. So let's talk about the name, because that's really why we're here. We looked at some things. Visit Currituck. Man, let's start there. That's kind of an easy place to start, at least the discussion, right? People do not search for tourism information by county name. The research presentation that we gave you, we actually showed you that, right? Mm-hmm. People are not looking for Currituck County places to stay, Currituck County lodging, Currituck County homes to stay in for vacation. That they're not really driven that way. You're no different than most places. That's the case. That's not the destination. Currituck Outer Banks. Currituck has little or no awareness to the Outer Banks visitor. We ask. It's not my opinion. When we did the research for people visiting Outer Banks, they're not aware of Currituck that much. I don't think that's a big surprise to you all, but sometimes you got to hear something again. Corolla and the Currituck mainland. That's a little confusing, low awareness. Again, if people aren't familiar with Currituck, and no too hard criticisms, but we've kind of been operating that way for a little bit. We say the mainland, right? Why? Probably to make sure everybody's happy. I don't know. I'm just making that up. But the reality is, we need something that resonates. That's why we're going through this exercise. We learned that Currituck's not meaning something. We need something that's going to have some substance to it. We could push Currituck harder. It's like, well, Steve, we've got a decent budget, so why don't we make the Currituck mainland mean something? That's a route we could go. We want 2 different marketing strategies, 2 different budgets are necessary to do it. Is that really the fiscally responsible thing to be doing with the funds that we collect? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. And then we could call ourselves the Corolla Outer Banks. That's actually we kind of been doing that. If I was over there, Corolla, they'd be like, that's what we say. That's what they say in Corolla. They are the Corolla Outer Banks. It's true. The problem is it doesn't really solve the issue. What are we going to do? How are we going to market ourselves for the non-Corolla stuff? Corolla's been great. Corolla's the golden goose. What are we going to do? I can't predict what's going to happen, but there's a good chance there's a bridge built. What happens then to the areas around where the bridge is built? What's that area called? Corolla Outer Banks? I don't think so. What are you going to call it? I don't know what's going to go there. It could be a convention center there or something. I'm just throwing things out there. What's it going to be called? I know what I'd do if I was in charge of convention sales. It's going to be something Outer Banks, because that's going to get the attention of meetings and get people to want to stay there, right? Mm-hmm. But it isn't Corolla. So what do we do? How do we claim what is ours? I think this is it. Does the next slide tell you what we think it should be? The Northern Outer Banks. Surprise. Sometimes when you go through branding and you go through naming assignments, and we have the fun opportunity to do so, people expect that you're going to come with some whiz-bang creative, over-commercialized name. That's not right for us. You want something that's natural, that feels like it belongs. That's why I just showed you all the examples that it's already out there. We didn't come up with it. We're just recommending that we use it, right? No one has claimed it, but it does accomplish some of our check marks that were really important to us. It does claim the portion of the Outer Banks that are ours. It is a different kind of Outer Banks experience than Kill Devil Hills and Nag's Head and that place. We are a different experience. And sure, it's a more sophisticated thing that we learned in the research. It also can mean more than just beach. We have the opportunity to define what the Northern Outer Banks is. In fact, we did a video for you that we showed to residents of Currituck County. We collected some the last time we were here and said, hey, what do you think about this? So I'll show you, and then I'll tell you what they said, okay? You ready? In here?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
We need to use one.
Heading south on Route 168 out of Virginia, you cross into North Carolina. And immediately sense this isn't just the home stretch of your vacation. You've arrived. Because there's something in the air that betrays that coastal vibe, without yet seeing the coast. Oh, there are hints here and there as you pass rolling fields, seafood outlets, glimpses of a towering lighthouse, beach attraction billboards, and quaint communities. But by the time you hit the township of Currituck, you're clearly seeing the water. Of course, you're in the northern part of the Outer Banks, in Currituck County, where an Outer Banks vacation begins, where Corolla's sprawling, awe-inspiring beaches beckon, and coastal adventures await. Shaped by the water, nestled between the Atlantic Ocean, Currituck Sound, and the mainland is a place where Corolla's pristine beaches are connected to pristine farmland and a wealth of natural beauty, iconic maritime history and destinations, unique roadside attractions, and hidden gems. The very things that make a trip to the Outer Banks even more memorable and complete, and found in these northern reaches. Less developed with a greater focus on preserving its natural landscapes, wildlife, and attractions, here you'll find a more laid-back, quieter alternative to the busier, more crowded tourist areas of the OBX. A place made for catching your breath while unwinding and thriving in the salty sea air. From the wide, windswept beaches of Corolla and Corova, where grass-covered dunes shelter majestic, free-roaming wild horses, to the marshes, shallows, and maritime forests of the Sound, a prime attraction for migratory ducks and other waterfowl, from cycling through a national wildlife refuge on scenic Knott's Island after arriving by ferry, to paddling the calm waters of Back Bay canals. From the rich nautical history of Corolla's Currituck Beach Lighthouse, Maritime Museum, and Whalehead, to the compelling stories of the historic Jarvisburg Colored School Museum. From abundant local farm markets and stands lining the highway with the freshest produce, baked goods, and gifts, to a winery, distillery, and brewery offering tastings, tours, events, and concerts. Whether the sounds of waves crashing on remote shores, children's laughter at a water park, or the rumble of monster trucks. Whether watching the sun rise over the ocean or set dramatically over the Sound. Whether you choose to play in the surf, in the sand, or on land. These unforgettable sights, sounds, and experiences are exclusively found, only found, on this side of the Outer Banks, the north side, in the northern Outer Banks.
Sign me up.
What's great about this process, everything pulls together with this. Northern Outer Banks could, if you're only talking beaches, is simply a little bit less of the chaos, a little more sophisticated, maybe not for everybody as much, and we're okay with that. But Northern Outer Banks could also be Knott's Island. It'd also be maritime history. It could also be the farmers markets. It could be our ag offerings that we have here. It could be that we're simply recruiting sports to come to our in the regional sports tournaments and come to the Northern Outer Banks. If I promote just the Outer Banks, now they're going to be upset because they can't get to the beach from here when they're playing. Not the sports that we're getting. The Northern Outer Banks can stand for more than beaches, yet it doesn't exclude our Golden Goose at all. It allows us to be both. And it came together perfectly, mainly because we listened. I love to say we came up with it. You know we didn't. You probably use it in your vernacular as well. So, let's see. Wrong remote. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. So I want to show you, I just want to give it some context. I think that's important to evaluate things. And everything I'm going to show you, none of it is resolved at all. But more than a name, I want to give you some context of what it looks like and show you some things. First of all, let's see. So yeah, Northern Outer Banks. Again, we're not down the road of developing logos yet. But I wanted to, there's a destination name that is worthy. It leverages Outer Banks, but it definitely could work there. Of course, when you have a lot of what's going on in Corolla, oops, there it is. So instead of an umbrella, that's what we're talking about. It's really an umbrella brand, as they often call it, or a master brand, right? You see that in packaged goods all the time. But when it comes to a hero product like Corolla, it needs to be front and center. And the ability of the umbrella brand is actually to be supportive and tell you where it is. And you can see through this exercise, it inverts quite well, right? So yeah, we could use it as Northern Outer Banks in North Carolina. We can put anybody under there, actually. We could put Powell's Point. I could put Currituck. I could put Moyock, right? We could keep going on and on of whatever destination when it's appropriate. We do not do a lot of advertising for our smaller towns, but when we do, when it's appropriate to, it works, right, of saying where it's at. So we showed all this to stakeholders, as Greg mentioned. Here's what they said. Northern Outer Banks is a no-brainer. I think one person said, duh, we paid y'all for that? Right? Of course, it's a natural fit, right? I've heard of the Northern Outer Banks. It's easy to understand and could be memorable. It's definitely a thumbs up, right? I can go on.
Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up. Absolutely.
Who would say that?
Right. The Northern Outer Banks makes common sense. It's believable and memorable. So, it's interesting. The Northern Outer Banks does connect the mainland and Corolla. I think that's super important with this assignment. Over 60% of visitors to the horse farm are from Corolla. They come to the farm, see the horses, and they make a day of it on the mainland. I think we heard that from the wildlife folks. All right. We haven't developed any. There's nothing is final. But I wanted to show what could this work when we actually have advertising. You all spend a great deal of resources and time towards advertising and promoting or managing and reminding people to visit here. So let's make sure it could work in that setting. So we kind of went through just some options of it. Again, none of this is final or even close to going out the door. It's just want to give it some context, if that makes sense to everybody. Go ahead, Gary. Right? Where does the sun rise over the ocean and set dramatically over the sound? Excuse me, where in the Outer Banks does the sun rise over the ocean and set dramatically over the sound? Only in the Northern Outer Banks. Where in the Outer Banks do 220 steps lead to the most amazing views? Only in the Northern Outer Banks. Where in the Outer Banks can you see wild horses and dolphins in the same place? Only in the Northern Outer Banks. Where in the Outer Banks does the sun rise over the ocean and set dramatically over the sound? Only in the Northern Outer Banks. All right, let's get it over here now. There we go. Where in the Outer Banks are pristine beaches connected to pristine farmlands? Only in the Northern Outer Banks. Could work for billboards. Again, the idea, we're playing here, where in the Outer Banks? It's the Northern. So we're just establishing, remember our strategy? Claim what's ours. Let's claim our position in the Outer Banks. Yep, so it could work for events. It could work on either sides. And that was the test, just to make sure we have something that can be flexible. And part of that is to make sure there's more than one campaign. Like, that's great, this one campaign. Reality is, we're not doing this for one campaign. It should be able to work, have some legs, and year after year. So I think we did a different one. It was one. Go ahead to another one, Greg. Yeah. This just shows events, right? Where in the Outer Banks is award-winning barbecue served up with bull riding and barrel racers, only in the northern Outer Banks. Okay, now let's go to the other campaigns. Make sure it can work another way. Wild horses, waves, whalehead, only in the northern Outer Banks. And everybody, there's no one else in the Outer Banks that can give us all of that, right? No way. In fact, let me read the body copy real quick. Only in Kerala will unforgettable memories be filled with wild Spanish Mustangs roaming free on uncrowded, pristine beaches, stunningly beautiful sunsets, historic maritime attractions, and abundant laid-back family fun. TheNorthernOuterBanks.com. Oh, all right. Did you skip one? Dunes, ducks, Digger's Dungeon. only in the northern Outer Banks. Kind of a fun way. You see what we're having fun with this. Again, I'm not here to try to sell a campaign. I'm just trying to show there's a lot of ways we can talk about it, and it works. It checks all the boxes. Next one, Greg. Whoop, you skipped again. Waves, wild horses, water park. Only in the northern Outer Banks. Waves, wellhead, wild horses. Works for billboards. Marshes, maritime history, monster trucks, northern Outer Banks. And again, there's no logo here. It's just a type treatment to hold a place for everybody. Waves, wild horses, and water parks. All right. So yeah, there's two different ways there. So again, it's not about a campaign. It's just about a notion of you can't start with anything, with a campaign, with communication, with logos, nothing, until you know what you're going to call yourself. And that's a pretty big one. And so that's our recommendation. Is to, and it's got to be, it has to be something that's flexible. It's got to be versatile. Sometimes it needs to take a back seat and be supportive. And I think we kind of showed you that example of doing that. But it definitely checks all the boxes for us. So, any questions?
I do. This is just kind of not related to it, but related to it. So, recently, with the amount of rain we've had, flooding and stuff in the 4 Drive, there has been a very real concern from the residents, and something I've talked about for years, to close the 4 Drive beach down to residents and property owners only and stop the day tripper up there. And so I guess it's, if we push this kind of thing, the day trippers don't really, that day tripper doesn't provide anything to us financially. They go up, they sit on the beach, and they probably leave their trash at the park when they come out and they air down.
Day trip, for clarity, that's.
So we get people that come up from Dare and Eggs Head, they get a day park.
They're staying down there and go up.
Yeah, and they're not really utilizing the things that are in Corolla, right? And when we went to the parking pass, as a matter of fact, and limited the number of them available to the public, you ruined our vacation. We stay in Kill Devil Hills every year, and we drive up and go to the beach. And so we heard that probably, 7,500 times, something like that, in emails and things of that nature. So I guess I'm not really trying to put you on the point, but
That's okay.
Would that really hurt us or not? I guess is the question.
Yeah.
And it may not be an answer right this moment.
That's okay. I don't mind giving a response to it best of my ability at this point. I think that's a marketing issue. What we call ourselves is important. When we speak, who are we, right? Mm-hmm. If that's an issue, I'd be very hesitant in how much I'm going to market to those places, telling them what's up here. Maybe I need to let my foot off the gas, right? There's a need. I mean, I could understand some of your retailers at Timbuktu going, you know what, we need to get some of those people up here. I'm sure that happens sometimes, right? So they have a need to do that, right? What we tell people is up in the northern Outer Banks is important. So it might be more of a marketing issue than a branding issue, right? We do stand for wild horses.
Right. That's the problem, right?
That's
the problem.
undeniable.
Right. You just had 30 pictures of horses or images of horses in our beaches, right? And it is the one thing that sets Crawl apart from every other beach, period, the end.
Yeah. I mean, what you all went through with the beach pass,
right.
You actually had to start marketing that there's limitations so people knew better before they drove all the way up there. And I think that's how you solve issues like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Thoughts?
I like the fact that now you've got something that you can go find.
Right. Right.
Whereas that was a challenge with Currituck OBX doesn't show up if you Google it.
Right.
So No, I think it works.
I like it because it brings in the mainland in one fell swoop. We
Yep.
don't have to separate this from that. It just kind of is that one thing that we have been looking for to unite us as a county, and I think this is a good way to do that. It kind of encompasses Lower Currituck, the Outer Banks, as well as Moyock and all the areas, Gibbs Woods and Knott's Island. Everybody gets a little bit of love.
Yeah, I'm glad he said
Gives us
that.
something tangible to hold on to.
At the onset of this project, I was concerned about. I thought maybe I was maybe too familiar. I'm like, I know how important that is over there, and this is just so distinctly different. I don't know how you have one that combines them. Sometimes the best answers are the simple answers. And, Mark Twain famously said, I would have written you a shorter letter, I just didn't have the time. And part of what this process required was took the time to listen to people that are here and to hear it objectively. And I think it presented itself a really good solution that does exactly what you said, Ms. Jarvis.
I would love to have, in a couple of years as this goes forward, is the residents who live on the mainland side, when people ask them where they're from, they can say the Northern Outer Banks. Not this small city. It's an identifier of where they are. People know that big brand, and we're the northern piece of it. So that was part of the thought process as well.
It's easier to spell than Currituck too.
Yeah, and make no mistake, I tried, Greg and I both, I think, tried to emphasize, is for tourism. We've done enough research in Currituck to know something. People that live in Currituck and call it home are very proud of it by name and the heritage that it brings. That's very important. So make no mistake, that is not to be diminished at all. It's super important.
But the interesting aspect of it is, where do you live? Oh, I live in Currituck.
Where's
right? that? Okay. The Northern Outer Banks. Oh, okay. And that becomes self-explanatory.
Yeah, the differentiator between us and, if you say to anybody, I travel a lot, all the time. So anytime I live in the Outer Banks. Oh, I love going to Nags Head, it is forever. It was, much more known than us. And so this is, I like it. This is a great example of capturing another part of the Outer Banks and making it our own. So
It leverages the most obvious thing. The thing we couldn't help, you have to leverage the Outer Banks for tourism again, but our way, something that reflects our character. And what's great, because we're attaching to Outer Banks, we can define what northern is, what that means. And it's not just a more sophisticated beach experience. What's that?
right,
Stops at duck.
yeah,
Right, it stops at duck. That's right.
yeah. When you fall off a duck, you fall into the Northern Outer.
And back at Powell's Corner.
That's right. That's
Flat
right.
Earth in between.
When I'm traveling and somebody asks me where I'm from, and I tell them the Outer Banks and they say Nags Head, I always say, no, the northern part, that's the pretty part.
Yep.
We don't call
Yeah.
it a low rent.
All right.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, if that's it, any other questions? I know y'all
think
got an
so.
agenda of other things, so
It's about time you guys got here.
Right.
right. Sorry, yeah. The dang hurricane kept us away last week.
Wham, wham, wham.
Right. Thank you for your patience on
All
that.
right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, Tamron asked that if we like this, that we adopt and accept the name or the slogan, I guess, of this evening, so that they can move on with the next phase of this operation. And it seems to me that the board is pretty happy with this.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. I don't know that we need a vote, do we?
No,
I think no. Okay. I think we've got it. All right. Thank you all for that. Great presentation as always. Hopefully Kevin will be here in a few
Real
minutes.
quick, do we have access to that video? I mean,
Yeah. It's all, as long as all the photos, I think you all own. Yes. So. Yeah.
well, it got presented. It's public record.
That's true. That's true.
It's not too late.
All right.
But
I'm not asking everybody there.
I'll give it to Tamron's team.
thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Cameron.
Good to you.
Sweet.
Moving on to our discussion items this evening. The first item on the agenda This PB 2410, the Howard text amendment, which came before us about 6-8 weeks ago, I guess. And we thought there may be some points of interest in there to adopt, and there was also some question around how they may affect current buildings or future projects. If something burnt down, for instance, and had to be rebuilt or redevelopment, how would some of these things affect those? And so, opportunity for us to speak about that and talk to our staff and figure out what it may or may not do to us or for us. So, with that being said, I guess, do we need to do a recap? Would that be good for anybody of where we were? I mean, it's been a while. Jenny, do you remember any of the stuff?
I can do a recap. I have the PowerPoint from.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
And the staff report from the June 3rd meeting, I believe, was in your agenda packet for this evening.
Yep.
So this was the text amendment submitted by Don Holler for an amendment to the ordinance related to several items. The first was to require in a plan unit development, there's currently, in the transitional provisions of the ordinance, there's currently requirements for certain uses in plan unit developments that require special use permits. So firstly, the proposal was to add some additional use types that would need special use permits. So you can see here it's hotels with 50 or more rooms, and then commercial, industrial, mixed use, or multifamily development consisting of 30,000 square feet of floor area or more, so large projects, would also require approval of a special use permit in plan unit developments. And then under the special use permit requirement, this is just generally for capturing other large projects in Corolla, that commercial, industrial, mixed use, or multifamily development consisting of 30,000 square feet of floor area located in Corolla would need a special use permit. So that would be outside of a PUD in other zoning districts. This is in the procedure for special use permit, and this is adding additional requirements that those special use permit applications for the large developments should require a TIA, a traffic impact analysis prepared by a registered engineer, and a stormwater plan prepared by a registered engineer, and that would be at special use permit application, which this was one of the things I think the board had some questions about.
I figured it's a good stopping point, maybe kind of pick it apart too as we go through it. So that traffic impact analysis at the SUP phase, I think, well, at least for me, would be overly financially burdensome on an applicant that hasn't even received permission to build a project yet. So that, for me personally, was problematic. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but it certainly has its ups and downs. It provides us with information and knowledge, but if we're going to do it in Corolla, it actually probably should apply everywhere, and maybe it does in some other cases. I know we got one for Fost, for instance, or Flora. I think they did a TIA.
And see, that's so to this point for those types of developments, it's been the developer that's doing that willingly to
Right.
bring that information to this board in order to issue the special use permit.
And aren't they probably going to do one anyway? I mean, the cost is going to be borne by them anyway,
Born by whom?
the developer.
Right. Well, Mr. Howard is suggesting that we add a stormwater and traffic impact analysis before they even got approval. Or typically, your stormwater management, for instance, gets done after they receive their use permit and approval. They go through and formally finish the design of the project, right? They don't, or do they? They haven't done. They just say that they will meet the stormwater requirements. We may put something on it like Fost. We did a 500-year storm versus a 100-year storm or something like that, where we put an additional constraint on them, but they haven't done the actual analysis, the lay of the land, how big the pond's going to be, the BMPs, all that stuff, right?
I think the difference is going back. So transportation, I'm not sure that's a bad idea to do earlier in the process because if you can't fix transportation, there is no fix for transportation, right? Stormwater, you have the requirement not to emit anymore, blah, blah, blah. You have to
Right.
retain, et cetera, and whatever requirements we put on, in most, and I'm gonna say subdivisions, like loosely, or, that may result in a deeper pond or a bigger pond, or that, in other words, that's something that can be fixed or engineered in, because they have to meet the engineering requirement.
Right.
That may mean, they may lose the house on the end because they need that for stormwater retention. Oh, well, that's what they would get with, that in that process, right?
Well, the other thing is too, where we've had projects like, I think it was the sand mine in Mayock, where we had a crowd of people come that lived around Samuel Chapel Church in Mayock. And there was a lot of upstream, if
Right.
my
That
memory
wasn't the
recalls.
sand mine, though, was it?
Yeah, it's the same mine, where they did some upstream, which like if it was beforehand, I mean, I agree with the transportation thing is a definite, I agree with Bob and the rest of the board but like the stormwater thing, you could actually put more, and we've done that.
Well, that's something we're working through.
Yeah.
We haven't adopted upstream analysis yet, but we were working towards
Well, yeah, I
that.
know we've had a couple,
Out
we've
of,
made a couple people do that, haven't
flooding
we?
that
Or
occurred.
they volunteered.
Yeah.
They-
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Camden, I believe, has that for upstream analysis before. And so,
But the transportation thing makes no difference. DOT's gonna be the limiting factor there.
right.
And let the developer get approval, and then DOT and him will work together on anything that's got to be done.
The problem with that, though, is once you give them a special use permit, you, in most people's eyes, have already given them a green light. And to me, if there's an issue, the earlier we can help head off that issue, the better. And it seems to me that this special use permit procedure is the way and if they're going to bore the cost of it anyway, I think
They're not.
they're not going to pay for the stormwater
The
plan.
stormwater plan, yes, but they haven't designed the project yet. So let's dispose of traffic impact analysis first. Let's just stay on that topic because that was the first one in this. So a TIA, while anecdotally interesting, DOT's the one that the only thing they can make them, they can't even make them put a stoplight in. They can make them put a decel lane in. They can make them do some stuff like that, but they're going to have, right, or whatever, right? There's a few things that they can ask to be added to the project, which would come through TRC typically, right? The DOT would have some kind of comment or no comment at all. That was more the case.
Really not getting a lot of
Okay.
comments from DOT up front.
And we can't make
And
them
that's
do
why,
anything either.
I'm sorry.
But, okay, so this could be grounds, if it's going to create a snarl in traffic, and then it's up to us then to say, this is not a good location for this fill in the blank, this subdivision, this shopping center, this hotel,
But that's
whatever.
Not that's not a reason for denial unless we make it part of the adequate public facilities. You
Well, if it is going to not meet
Endanger
those four standards, if you're using the
public
fact.
health and safety, right?
Okay, so it could be a public safety issue. I mean, traffic is a public safety issue. If it's going to be, I think of that shopping center that may or may not ever be built beside Moyock Middle. Part of the problem I had with that shopping center there is the traffic. I mean, you've got Foss, Flora, you've got the middle school, you've got Eagle Creek, soon to be whatever the one that was approved, Lotus Ridge. I mean, part of the issue for me is if there is going to be an impact with traffic that's going to impact the way people live and get safely from place to place, this is the place to raise the concern, I think.
I don't have an issue with the with the traffic thing at the beginning before a project, but like if we did the stormwater at the same time, I mean, like you can't.
You
I
can't do
mean,
stormwater then.
That's why I mean that part of it don't make sense. But the traffic thing, I don't have an issue. If you knew I wanted to put something across from the courthouse, and and it had an overpass or I don't know, just something off the wall that could cause some issues, you would know before the project, the traffic part of it.
But I will remind the board, when we looked several years ago at doing traffic analysis, we had 5 different engineering firms say, we're just gonna do whatever DOT says we can do.
We've heard that before us.
Yeah.
They're not going to go step out on a limb and cross DOT.
No, that's true.
But hadn't DOT, I know in some of the projects, when DOT would do the analysis and they grade them, it was graded low.
D or F, right?
Yeah, and we went ahead and approved it.
Well,
and-
yeah, but that's not a reason to deny it. Just because it's going to cause congestion doesn't mean we don't. First of all, we can't build roads, can't do anything with roads that or ditches. So, in the end, it's up to DOT if there's going to be a problem to fix that problem.
But like Commissioner Jarvis said, if you live in an area, and I think Paul was alluding to it too, with the traffic, you can't fix traffic after they can throw up a stoplight or something, but that's not going to fix it. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of cars coming out of one place,
Right.
it's a
Not in
health-
harmony
it's
with the
safety
surroundings.
issue.
But there was a bill in the legislature this session that says you cannot overturn what DOT says.
But I don't
They
think
are
we're
the
talking
final-
about overturning what DOT says.
If they say the road will handle the traffic, that's all that,
Right.
they're
That's
the
all that matters.
final arbiter on it.
Whether
But
it's
they don't even usually comment, do they?
not
typically in the
usually, but
TRC
most of the stuff
process.
is innocuous. Lotus Ridge is not that many houses. It's not a big deal. That road's going to handle the traffic. It's not going to rise. But they did
When
look
Blackwater was busy, it handled
at right.
7 times of what Lotus Ridge
Well,
was.
they did get involved, or at least I know Justin worked with them, for instance, on Flora, and they are redesigning that whole thing to put a traffic circle in to change how you come off a survey road to actually close off the end of survey road. So there is an aspect where DOT does get involved, or the developer can become involved to do something that makes sense. They wanted him to change something, so he did. In this case, because of the commercial that potentially could go in there and everything else that's going on with the neighborhood.
To the best of our recollection, has DOT ever said no?
No.
And I'll defer to the senior. But in 10 years, I've never heard of DOT denying. They just don't, right? I mean,
Half the time, they don't even put anything
If
down.
they do, they're admitting liability,
Right.
and they're not.
But they have
Didn't they-
given them bad, scores.
Didn't they do something on the Corolla? Didn't they? Because there was something, I thought they denied something on one of the
that had to do. I want to say it was going to Rick's thing.
Yeah. They
That
denied
intersection
something.
there was something. that-
Because they own that piece on
Yeah.
the corner
Yeah.
right there, where the farm market, that's DOT. That was where the road is
By the
about for
way-
expansion for the bridge terminus, when they were considering that area as a bridge terminus.
Yeah.
There was something to do with
Denied.
that.
That's
They
I
didn't
remember
want to
they.
give it up.
Yeah, they're not gonna give, he was asking them to release it because they're no longer gonna use it, and they said no, I think. Does that sound familiar, Jenny?
Yeah, it was about access through the parcel where the
Yeah.
farm market is.
Yeah, and
it's-
I was not a proponent of that either. Accessing maybe, but not coming outbound because of the traffic. Anyway.
I think that was they did it like you said. I remember that.
Does the traffic survey provide us tools by which we can work with an applicant to get things that we want?
Potentially.
Your example, right? You're familiar with the area, you're familiar with the traffic, you're familiar with all of that. Traffic survey comes out and said, here's gonna be the challenge with traffic here. That does provide us with an ability to appeal, right? And go, hey, this is what would work best for us.
Right. Matter of fact, they did do a traffic impact analysis.
Right.
On that
Correct.
particular project.
And my concern with waiting till the next phase is the deeper they get into the development,
Right.
the more drastic the changes to what they're proposing need to be in order to accomplish it.
I guess TIA isn't that big a deal. I just don't want to see it turn into exactly what you two were referring to, that, when we should deny it because it's going to create bad traffic or congestion. And that's the reality of any expansion anywhere you go. Our county's growing, you're going to have traffic. It's going to continue to get worse ostensibly, but DOT eventually is going to have to do something about it. Whether it's changing the center lane and taking that out and putting in decel lanes and the U-turn stuff like they're doing on 17, for instance. You all right, Megan?
Yes,
Okay.
just getting that out of the way.
So I guess actually we can involve you in this discussion. Now that you've got that out of your way.
Okay, did you pick the mug before?
So I guess,
Code,
you
or
know,
was
so
it-
you've heard what we said about,
Is that?
about traffic impact analysis. We don't now have it as, I guess it could be used to public health and safety. Is that, would that fall
can
under the
add-
auspices of public health and safety? But
You can add an additional review standard to make sure that they meet that.
Jenny, do you
Is
have
that what he's proposed?
I think too.
What's the form?
something? He's asking for a traffic impact analysis at the application
Right, and I don't-
process and the SUP process.
Right.
Which we don't currently require.
And I don't have, and sorry to interrupt, but I don't have this on a slide for you, but this is referencing the TIA of the ordinance that's currently there. So there's some pieces that are supposed to be included in the TIA, which include traffic volumes, driveway locations, spacing between intersection signals, relationship with existing collector plans, internal traffic flow and parking layout, pedestrian access, proposed actions necessary to alleviate traffic circulation problems, and any additional information as deemed necessary by the director.
So that part I remember reading that so
Not just about the streets, it's about the design of the project
the
as
internal
well.
flow of the project, right? Well, that makes sense. Ostensibly, they're going to do that to have traffic flow through it, but can that come outside of that project? Because the way you just read that, it sounded like you can almost say, well, it's going to affect traffic down the street, so you got to figure that out too.
There's other components that are the general site and land use description, the number of trips to be generated, the volume of existing background traffic on roads adjacent to and within 1/2 mile of the track, the heaviest hourly volume of traffic expected to be generated by the site, the volume ratio of inbound and outbound trips to the site, directional distribution of the vehicle trips, assignment of vehicle trip volumes to the roadway network. So there's more to it than just what I
Right.
originally read.
So I don't know. I'm curious as to how this can or cannot be used currently. I guess if we implement a TIA study at the SUP process level, at that level of the process, how can that be used positively or negatively? I guess if you could it affect approval of a project under the public health and safety?
I think that's certainly the review standard that it would fall under.
Right. But how do you
Whether it would
determine
endanger-
whether? So I guess how do you determine whether it's public health or safety?
How
Right.
do
I
you
mean,
stand
what's
up
the
to an appeal?
objective
Right.
standard?
You know,
Right.
who's going
That's
to be
my
the expert
problem.
witness?
Well, ask even that if it's done, the initial like this text amendment is saying, and then the project's done, and then there's some issues. Does that give the developer, whether commercial, whatever it is, says, hey, at my initial when we did the traffic analysis, whatever, this is what they said we needed, and then now there looks like some other factors of some safety hazards.
that should be covered. So I guess in this, like an example, if for this particular Corral project, they came back and did a traffic impact analysis and said you need a decel lane that needs to be allowed for stacking of 5 cars on it, for instance. That would be how they would say we have positively affected the safety aspect of it by creating a decel lane. Is that kind of a correct way to interpret something like that, I guess? I mean, that would be their expert coming in saying, well, we're going to put in a decel lane.
Right.
And that's how we help the public health and safety, because we have moved cars off the road and also created a turning lane in and out maybe of the project or whatever, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think it could. And also it could be potential for conditions imposed on the special use permit, whatever comes out of that traffic impact analysis.
But what I was getting at is if it's done at the beginning, before the project, whatever it is, commercial, sand mine, neighborhood, whatever. If it's done at the beginning, and then when they build their project, I mean, I would hope there would be some kind of go back over it, process. Because if the
What does that look like though? So if you go back in, you've already approved it. They're going to have to build it to whatever standards they have to build it to, whatever's in the UDO. So the only thing we do is a look back is as built.
yeah
Survey, right? But you can't. I guess we talked about that with the Enoch Crawl Light when they came in and used their traffic impact analysis. I actually asked them about doing an actual study to make sure that it did work. What they suggested would meet what they were doing, and in fact, watching it over the last year, it has actually done exactly what they said with the way that they phased that operation in and stuff. So
I'm just curious, like I said, if which I know we could probably put some additional stuff, when they came in towards the end, if there's something that comes up. But I mean, could a developer for whatever type of project it is say, well, hey, the TIA that we did at the beginning said we had to do these 10 things and we did those 10.
Right.
We don't want to do 11 and 12 because before we even came here, 1 through 10 were done.
right.
I mean, that could be
I think we're out of the loop at that point. They just
It's DOT.
Well, and that would be a condition of a major site plan.
right.
Okay.
So that would be the subsequent review.
And it comes down to what I said, an objective standard, because
Right.
what is a standard today might not be a standard tomorrow
Right.
for a different board.
Well, in that case, like the was it Foss where we got the 4 where they had a D on the traffic on a DOT record? They said here's a A, B, C, D,
It
right?
was Flora,
So if we do,
and it was an F. at
yeah, it was,
times.
right. There's an F where they showed what an F would look like. So that is the standard. DOT sets that standard. But do we say, well, your project's an F, it therefore will not or shall not until traffic conditions can be improved, or how do you use that to regulate that? It's anecdotally, it's interesting to see it, and maybe helps with things like a set of decel lane, widening the driveway out so that you have a right, left, turn, straight, whatever.
Or
right,
phasing.
or adding a light.
Phasing would be, that would be something
That's
that
something we
could.
can always do.
Well, I know, but it might be something that encourages us to do phasing and until, all the infrastructure is built and maybe the NCDOT's roads itself improve. I don't know. But to me, it does speak to the safety issue of one of the standards. I think, without traffic lights, there are going to have to be some kind of traffic mitigation moving forward. And we all know, that roundabouts and turnouts and things like that, apparently people in Currituck are horrified by them. Horrified. And I'll just leave it and stand on that, knowing what happened at some of the public meetings.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, they're not going to put more stoplights up and down this highway. We know that
Right.
NCDOT, that's
yeah.
that's what's in their mindset. And so, until we can embrace some kind of traffic mitigation, to me, it is up to us to say, is this gonna be in harmony? We have that standard. Is this shopping center gonna affect the safety and health of people because there's people trying to get into one entrance? I mean, to me, if they're designing a shopping center or whatever, anything over 30,000 square feet, we need to know what the impact is gonna be as far as traffic. I mean, what's it gonna look like? And to me, it makes sense at this phase so they can plan better. And as you pointed out, conditions, we can put conditions on it.
Another option too, when you look at what NCDOT requires, is there's a threshold of daily trips. If there's 3,000 daily trips, they require a TIA. And other counties kind of implement that same idea. So you could, here it's a 50 or more rooms and square footage, but you could require like a trip count and say, okay, well, if it's over this amount, require.
I don't think you get it's almost like unless you do a traffic study, you're not
You're
going
not
to
gonna
know
get
what
the
the
trip.
trip count
Well,
is.
Sort of. You should know if it's a 150 room hotel, like whether it's 172. You're gonna know there's a metric.
There's
for that.
guidelines.
Right?
Agreed.
And then we know what the trip generation will be from the residences of a regular neighborhood per se, or a regular. This is a little weird because it's Corolla and it's not a regular residence where you have people going and coming and going. You're gonna have condos there, but it's not the same as them leaving to go to work at 7 o'clock every morning, coming home at 6 o'clock every evening, that you would typically see in a regular residential neighborhood.
Well, I'm sure there's like guidelines, right? That say, and I'm sure it goes down to resort community condominiums.
Right.
The average trip count is 7 a day or whatever. I think I like it being at the beginning, if for nothing other than to give us an eyes on, right?
I think I agree with that. I thinking it through and talking it out. It is there. It's what Selena said. I don't know.
Right.
That's the problem. I don't know. I don't want to see it being used, I guess, initially until we actually went through this exercise, or the future boards go through this exercise a couple times, to cause it to be a reason to try and deny something when you haven't actually put it in, you haven't implemented it, you haven't seen it in action. And you can go back and do, like Kevin's saying, you could look at it after it's completed 3 years down the road. Us as a county could actually sponsor that and look at, I guess, maybe, and look at, okay, this is what it does. How did it impact the area?
Well,
Right.
and I'm going to use the H2OBX exit as an example, right?
Perfect example.
Everyone probably in the county thought that had to have a traffic light and et cetera, et cetera. And, 3 or 4 years down range, I was stunned that DOT knew their stuff. And
We commented on how many times in here, God, we've got to have the accidents are going to be through the roof there.
And so, you still can't prevent the idiot factor, but I think that having the TIA at the beginning gives us an opportunity, having lived here, having worked here, driven here, to be able to provide some element of guidance or suggestions, or if it looks egregious, right? Okay, we'd like you to consider doing this or this.
Right.
Well, then you can go back over it too.
Right. But when they're going to have to meet DOT. DOT's not backing off from wherever. Right. They're going to do what they're going to do. And if H2OBX taught me anything, it's that they
might actually know something.
They actually have an idea as to what is necessary.
Another thing traffic impact analysis would do is, I think if you've got it at this stage, the people that live in and around a project or own property in Corolla, for example, it makes them understand, it clues them in as to what to expect. It won't give them buy-in necessarily because, well, that's just not going to happen in some.
All change is bad.
But it gives them information, and I think that's important. If when OBX the water park was being talked about, people down my way were nervous. We were very nervous about it. It is a dangerous stretch of the highway, but I think when you see the facts as to this is how it's going to work, this is how it's important. I think it helps quell some of those fears that people have when a project of any kind is going to be in and around the roads that they travel.
And they don't have to trust on the applicant's impression as to what it's going to look like. We know they don't trust Jenny. Point being, at least you get somebody in there that's,
Provided.
is an engineer, has experience, or knows how to whatever to say, here's what our analysis shows, right? And I just think, anyway.
It's a science,
just
too.
like,
It's a
Let me ask a
science.
question. We use false, for example. How many times have they come up here with an amended plan because they changed something in the development?
right.
You're gonna make them do a traffic analysis every time?
No.
Well,
It's
it
only-
changes the
It's at that,
circulation.
well, you're changing the SUP, but they haven't changed volume, density, or anything like that. I mean, they came
if they
in and
added,
changed.
if they wanted to add another 100 homes, I think, yeah.
What if they change just circulation patterns?
Do they have to come for a new special use permit?
Yeah, they're
They
amending their
amend the
special use.
special use
They're
permit.
amending.
But this is part of the initial, I mean, if they amend it, they've gone through this to get it in the first place. I don't think they'd have, unless it would have an impact, adding more houses, they wouldn't need to do
But that
another.
would be a completely different. I mean,
Right, that's a change.
That's a mega
change in
change.
scope. That's
Well,
that's not the same thing.
I don't think it is either.
well, okay.
I mean, but to your point, you know, the sidewalk is 4 inches off. Now they're going to come back in.
no, yeah, that did happen.
I mean, they're changing the internal circulation of like Flora. And they're gonna move traffic from Falls into Flora to come out with a roundabout.
Right.
Is that gonna require a new analysis?
Well, it isn't now because this is for Corolla.
I was gonna say, this is
But I'm
Corolla
saying,
specific.
Right.
we're talking about the same thing.
Yes. No. So Justin's going to have to come back to us. He's coming back with four anyway. So if we and that is something. And I said at the beginning of this, if we're going to do this in Corolla, we should do it on the mainland. I mean, it should be universal. This is something.
It absolutely should be
PUD,
universal.
I mean, we're doing MXR, we got PRD.
Right. PDR. So yeah, it's for the use permit. Well, again, we probably need to have a discussion about the mainland, where it would apply or not apply. In this case, it's a development with 30,000 square foot of floor area or more. So you're talking about a pretty big project there, of which there isn't much left. And then the question becomes, what about James Johnson's properties? There's no commercial there at 30. I guess you could with the 5-story hotel on T. You could get a 30,000 square foot.
Yeah, you can go 75 feet of height.
All right. That's another problem. He'll never sell that, so we're not in our lifetime. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay, well, so Kevin, are you? I'm guessing, Owen, you don't want to see the TIA come at the SUP level.
Not
that correct?
until they get something finalized.
Okay. What about you, Kevin?
I don't have an issue with it as long as we can address, like, and I know we can with some standards or something different because, like you said, like when Lotus Ridge, perfect example, I think Selena brought it up. People said that Puddin Ridge Road couldn't handle that traffic. If you weren't around here in 2005, 2006, and 2007 when Blackwater was rocking and jamming,
Yeah.
there was just as many vehicles on that road as there was on 168. So now, the solar farm's gone. They're not gone, but they're done building for the most part. So, I mean,
Back to being
like,
fairly quiet.
it kind of gives, as long as we can put something on the back end, which I know we can, I don't have an issue with it because they're going to have to pay for it regardless. And then at least we kind of have a broader spectrum of, of the whole.
So you want to see a before and like so they've done their traffic impact analysis. They presented to the board at the SUP process. We've accepted that. We put the conditions on it of you have to have a decel lane, you have to have X, Y, and Z in your project as a condition because of the traffic impact analysis. Then you want to see us come back with an as-built or an end use to
Yes, I mean,
validate
something,
what
if
they said they did.
yeah, if there's something that needs to be added for safety, I mean, I'm not,
But it's you wouldn't know until the project is
is done. That's what I'm saying, yeah, on the back end, I mean, if there's something.
But you're not going to come in after the fact and add a diesel lane.
That's basically is that what you're suggesting? That if it found that okay, the project was going to
After DOT
Right.
approved it, right? Whatever your plan was, and I'll use Tulsa Creek Elementary as an example, right? DOT said this is how you're getting in and getting out,
Yeah.
right? We don't have the authority.
We don't have the
I don't think
authority
we
to
have the
over-
authority to change what DOT has said. This is what's going to have to happen
Yeah.
because that doesn't fall within our jurisdiction.
that's a grimace.
Oh, I will say Tulsa Creek Elementary School is a little bit different because we have to go to the special unit within DOT that sort of I can't remember.
Okay, it was just an example.
But that is an example, yes, but,
But part of what drove that is I think the big transformer on. There's something.
I don't believe it was the transformer.
They did?
That will be
Okay.
moved.
That will be moved, yes.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So so I just want to be sure, Kevin, that we're understanding what you're saying, and you're basically wanting to have a second analysis after the project is
I'm
completed.
not saying like a full blown, like if we see something, I mean, we can put conditions on it, you know, at the end of it, if there's something of, this
Well, it's
isn't
too late.
safe.
Well, they've already, we could put a condition, I guess, that we can come back and tell you got to add X, Y, and Z if it is required. I mean, they're basically done with the project, and if it's phased out over years.
Well, and I'll use Foss as an example, right? Because
Yeah, it's still not done.
you and I aren't going to be commissioners when that is done, or Kitty, maybe even Selena. I mean, we have no idea how long it's going to take.
Yeah, that's true.
Owen will
Owen
always be
be
a
here.
But the point being, now you've got a completely different board, and if and let me just say, if it's a project that goes south, that's not a real great, here, good luck with this one. I mean, I think the project should stand. I just don't know what kind of authority you'd have to come back after the fact and make
True.
a change such a major feature.
Right. And do you want them back in front of you again? Have more time?
No, probably not.
And I know Jenny likes staying late all these nights and stuff, and Bill loves it. So
Bill lives for it.
okay. So Paul, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you'd like to see the traffic impact
Yeah, I
analysis.
think so. Okay.
I know you two do, and I'm okay with it. So, but I would like to, since we're talking about this, I do think we should definitely have a discussion about it for the mainland as well. I mean, how it could apply, right? All right. Okay.
And
So we took one step forward.
yeah.
And
then, like,
7 steps back.
Yeah,
back.
But we got going in the right direction ultimately.
Are we parking mainland discussion for later?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think we need,
Good.
we need to see, yeah, and it could, because there's, that's a whole nother box.
And just as a point of clarification for me, is it the intent that we're voting on?
Well, no, so what comes out of this, they can bring back to us. We
Got
had
it.
it on our
Okay,
September meeting.
just confirming.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
some
so it's-
aspects of it.
So it's Mr. Holler's text amendment. So if something
Got
comes
it.
out of this he agrees with,
Right.
wants to change it,
Got
he
it.
can do so. If not, we'll send
can-
his text amendment to you again as he
Well,
wants to see it move forward.
It's more of this is a work session, public comment. I'd be leery about voting on something that's not, anyway, got it.
Okay, so the other aspect of this, we got to 3. We're moving right along. Stormwater management was something that he suggested that we have prior to at the SUP level. And we have time and again said that just doesn't work because the project hasn't fully been designed. It's a sketch, conceptual idea,
Until
basically.
you start doing the engineering analysis and the hydrology, you're not going to be able to know.
Right. They're basically showing the basic location of where their BMPs will be and how the ditches will flow, what we saw recently with Mr. Ennis's project, and that it will meet whatever it needs to meet when the time comes. So that portion of it, I don't think we can do at a SUP level.
The stormwater plan.
Yes. They have a lot of surveying on the property to do. They're going to be digging the BMPs. That's going to give them soil basically to elevate the properties, flow the water left, right, north, south, east, west, whatever, and get it to the ponds or use it to dam them up. Whatever
Haven't
do.
they had, I mean, even in the preliminary plat, help me here, answer, even in the preliminary plat, they've had to hire a registered engineer though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this really a burden? I mean, is this?
Yes.
Okay.
It,
All
Yeah,
right.
that engineer's-
I would suggest you.
Jenny.
Did you have an?
I was just gonna say, even at preliminary plat, you're not getting like full-blown
Yeah.
engineering.
They're just
You're
showing
getting
you water's going
narrative
to, we
and,
think the water's
this
going
is
to
what we're
flow
gonna
this way.
design, and you may get,
Right.
we're gonna try to design to greater than the ordinance requires. Sometimes the applicants will.
But even
through
pond
that.
size, depending on the analysis, in the grade analysis, because, if you can imagine, you've got a tract of land that's wooded, that all the trees are coming off in order to whatever, you have no idea where that land ground level is going to wind up being until you have some element of clearance done. So you're not going to know how deep the ponds have to go. because you don't know how much you've got to raise up what you're raising or moving what you're moving.
Okay, so, but when they're presenting in a special use permit, when they're presenting for it, they still have to have some idea about their stormwater engineering.
Right.
And my question is, do you have to hire an engineer to do that at this phase?
They've already had,
Well, they need to be an expert in order to testify to
the
that,
engineers
so.
are here.
Answers yes,
Yes.
right?
Typically do.
Yeah, they're here, and they're gonna. As a matter of fact, they always come up and obviously, they come up to testify, and they say, ultimately, we're gonna meet it.
Right.
So I guess what I'm taking exception with, and I'm not making myself very clear, is these words, stormwater plan. So they are going to be testifying to a stormwater plan. An engineer is going to be testifying at this special use permit about a stormwater plan. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
No, I mean, they're going to be testifying that they're going to meet your stormwater regulations.
Right.
They're gonna meet your
Or-
regulations.
But they're not telling you
what the
how big
plan
the
is.
pond surface area is going
We
to be.
used Lowe's
Right.
Fridge. They used existing ditches and said they'll model them.
Right. They're gonna model the stormwater, water, how it will move through there, and they knew that it was low in the bottom northwest corner of that property.
I mean, they are
They're
often,
showing their BMP in there.
they're typically showing where the ponds and BMPs are proposed to be located.
So
They're already doing it, sounds like to me.
No, they're not.
A stormwater
Showing you-
plan.
Showing you what the project is gonna look like generally is what they're coming to us to do. They're showing you
Concept.
a concept or a sketch plan or whatever. This is what we envision the project to look like. The ponds are going to go here, here, and here. Water's going to move around to get to those, generally in this direction, because we know the lay of the land for the most part.
And
What we
that's-
don't know is how deep those ponds are going to be, how deep those ditches are going to be, how high the swales will have to be on the side of the ponds to hold in that water, all
Lot
those
lines.
lot lines.
So I guess what we could do is take out the part there that says that meets the standards of section 7.3 stormwater management, because we are at this stage having them present a stormwater plan prepared by a
That's not the
registered
right word.
engineer.
You said it was a plan.
No, it's not
Okay,
a plan.
stormwater plans have to be approved, right? It's not just, don't they typically have to be approved by like DEQ? So,
Well, it depends. And with a major site plan, it depends on whether they're triggering a permit from the state or not.
okay,
A project of 30,000 square feet would certainly need a state stormwater permit,
correct.
but that wouldn't be something that was designed to our ordinance requirements. Our ordinance is going to require much more storage and much more engineering than the state
Correct.
Right.
But you're asking them,
permit.
the design that they're turning into DEQ for approval, I get it, doesn't fall short of what we require.
Yes.
But the level of analysis that is necessary in order to obtain their permit from DEQ as part of their stormwater plan is going to be significantly greater than where they're at in this stage. And I'll go back to clearing the land or starting, ditch expansion and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of dirt work that really has to go on before you can really effectively model what you've got. I mean, if it's a cornfield, it's a cornfield, right? Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not
and
a soybean
these
field,
are-
but it's a cornfield.
And these projects that we're talking about right now are special use permits that will ultimately be major site plans.
Right.
So,
They're going to receive, but the point is that the stormwater management plan isn't probably they just need to, they're not doing it. It's not a plan at that point in time. It's really
Perhaps
not.
it's
It's
a
probably,
narrative.
it's incorrect terminology.
Okay, so we could say stormwater narrative prepared by
That would
registered.
make more sense, right?
that's what
So,
you're getting at preliminary
That's what you're
plat
getting.
already.
And it makes sense. That's where it belongs.
so once again, they're going to present stormwater narratives by a registered engineer at this phase, because they're going to be under oath and they're testifying to it. So maybe it's not what you're talking about with this full-blown stormwater plan with the state and by our UDO, but I still think it's a good idea to make them have a registered engineer that presents, and we can call it a stormwater narrative. But at this phase, I mean, I think if we don't require it, then there's no reason that they would present that.
They do every time we do an SUP.
Are they required to?
They come, yes.
Well, then
Every
why,
time-
if they're required to, why is this even here
no,
then?
This is going to a stormwater plan. They're
Plan
not doing
at-
that. They're
at
showing up and they're
first
showing
base.
us. They're showing us a conceptual idea of a project.
I get that.
Okay, that's it. But the engineer is saying when we get to the point that we actually get the SUP and we go into full design and engineering.
I would
We will
suggest to you a stormwater plan is probably a $150,000 to $200,000, probably even more level of effort.
And
So at the special use permit level, they are going to testify to their stormwater
Narrative.
narratives.
They should be,
Concept.
and I think that with preliminary plats, you typically definitely see a stormwater narrative that's designed by an engineer. Now, the
But are they
amended-
required to
the
do
amended
that?
sketch plan that was presented may not be.
But he still has to, in an amended sketch plan, before they still have to meet our stormwater policies, whatever that is, right?
But they'll,
It
they'll
doesn't
meet it
matter,
with
right?
the
Before
with
they
the
can
review.
get a CO.
Sure.
Before they can do it, they still have to meet that. So that standard is always there. It's not presented to us. It's actually more in line with your team to come in and review that they have checked off the boxes, right? That they've done this. So this is not an appropriate time. All the engineers do whenever they come in is tell us we're going to put together a stormwater plan, and yes, we will meet whatever we need to meet.
Well,
And they're
actually,
certified.
they even go further than that, and they say, in their narrative, if you will, are telling us what they're going to do. It always exceeds what our requirements are, or they wouldn't even be there in the first place.
And my question is, are they required to do that? I get that. So the question is, are they required to do that?
Not specifically at a special use permit.
So they should be. That's what I'm saying. That's where I'm landing.
As a condition of their permit, they still have to meet all of our standards.
I think what Selena's trying to say is formalize the fact that most of the people that are coming, in fact, just about all of them, when they come here, are already presenting a stormwater narrative, rather than just leave it to them in their good graces to do that, instill it formally that, yes, you're going to provide us with a stormwater narrative of how you're going to meet and or exceed our requirements.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
What you've been saying.
Well, the terminology is where we get,
Right,
it gets
right.
confusing, right? Because a plan is one thing, but your term of narrative, I think, is perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
I mean,
Paul.
like I said, even if we change this is this guy's, you know what I'm saying? If we want to change one thing on this and he doesn't like it, this is what he brought.
Right. Well, it is. So,
I mean, he could say, I don't like,
right.
Well, then we
We
deny
have
the
the-
whole thing.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
We can throw the whole thing out.
We also have
Called
the ability to
compromise for a
modify it.
reason.
Right, and
Say
that's,
we
and that's
like-
why we had this, is that we recognize that there were things in here that
There were some good points.
Had merit.
had merit, and it's brought to light some other deficiencies in that we don't have stormwater narrative as our term and a requirement.
And that's another one of those works out well on the mainland.
Right.
Yeah.
Down the road.
Even more so.
Yeah, not today.
Yeah, not today.
Okay, we got through
It's two.
page 1.
Okay. Next was amending the summer use table to add a special use permit requirement for hotels in Corolla with 50 or more rooms. Then within the specific standards for hotels or motels located in Corolla, also adding the same language about needing the TIA and the stormwater plan with the special use permit.
So basically the same thing.
Basically the same thing, yes.
Yeah, and again, I don't, I think to all of us are fine with the traffic impact analysis at the SUP level and putting in a stormwater narrative.
I like that term.
Okay.
She did a great job.
Leave it up to the teacher to come up with a big word like that.
Narrative.
When we had David Griggs here, we could have come up with a bigger, better word.
Oh, well, my vocabulary is not what it used to be.
Okay.
Get one.
So we're moving on, I guess. Item
Yes, ma'am.
5. So this was the community compatibility standards section of the ordinance. And the proposal was to add number 2 here, that buildings subject to the community compatibility standards shall be set back 75 feet from a lot line shared with an existing single-family detached dwelling to the maximum extent practicable. And this was discussed a little bit when you were talking about the multifamily setback at your work session months ago, that there was this additional setback for multifamily, but there was
not
no
for
additional
commercial.
setback for commercial adjacent to single-family dwellings. So that's what this particular provision is doing. I will kind of jump ahead just a little bit, and the multifamily design standard, which is the second text amendment that we were going to speak about tonight, that standard was to reduce the setback for multifamily buildings adjacent to properties with existing single-family dwellings from 100 to 80 with respect to the number of stories of the building. So reducing the setback from 100 to 80 for where you had to be in order to have 3 stories of a multifamily building. And the reason I bring that up is because these two standards are similar, because this section is community compatibility, that section is multifamily, but when your project's adjacent to an existing residential dwelling, then you're kicked into community compatibility, and the community compatibility standard controls.
Okay. And that's a good point. So Jenny and I were
So
talking.
this would control, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Well, this is actually, in this case, 75 is less than 80. We were actually a little bit stricter, right? So, but you brought up a good point, and Jenny and I were talking in the hall before I came in here, and when, in this particular project, I guess it triggered all this, the condos or townhome portion or whatever they want to call them, the multifamily on the northern end of this project, the original presentation to us was at 100-foot setback from the property line, but also the renderings were 3-story for that building. And I think all of us, I don't know if y'all caught this or not, but it's actually, they're only allowed to have 2 stories on that. Even at 100 feet, it's still 2 stories. You can have a 35-foot height, but it's still only 2-story dwelling. What was presented to us by Saga, I feel like, was a 3-story dwelling at 35 feet. Is that correct? But you had
I think it was
that.
more like at 80 feet, but.
Huh?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
The rendering that he showed us for the sketch plan,
yes,
right,
yes,
was
yeah.
it looked like a 3-story dwelling,
Right.
and it was going to meet the 35-foot threshold for
Correct.
height requirement. The problem was all along, and this is something that you guys had mentioned in TRC and before, was that he can only have a 2-story dwelling. It could be up to 35 feet, but it can only be a 2-story dwelling on that initial, I guess, in this case, the east side of the building that would abut the residential properties.
Right, the rear.
Right. So we've got a confluence of things happening, to pull a Davidism out, and that what Submit's project was really at about 80 feet, which is what prompted changing it from 100 to 80 feet to let him build this project as he presented to us. What I didn't realize at the time was this was only a 2-story project. I thought it was 3 stories because of what he presented. I did not catch that at the time of our amended sketch plan with him and the SUP. Did anybody else catch that, is my question. So what's being presented here is actually pretty much in line with what is already on the books, other than, right?
Yes, except for the next item.
Right.
That
It
we'll get to.
adds further intrigue. So,
Yeah, which we can look at it real quick if you want. The next
Okay.
item is that in the community compatibility section, that the buildings shall maintain a height. This is Mr. Howler's text amendment, that the building shall maintain a height of maximum of 2 stories and 30 feet within 100 feet of a lot line shared with an existing single-family detached dwelling.
and section B of this is also his, right? Buildings over 3 stories in height shall be broken up into modules or wings with smaller or shorter portions. Is that his, or was that already in there? 'Cause
That was
I
already
looking
there. His
some
is
of it.
only right here.
Okay.
This,
'Cause I thought
this
I was reading
strike
through
through
the
of
EDA, trying to figure
35
it
and
out.
underline here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. I know, right?
Go back a slide, Jenny.
Sure.
And do you have that slide by any chance that's in our packet that shows, I believe it's in our packet that shows
Yeah,
the
it's on-
buildings? Oh, I mean, for her to put up.
The setback, like the,
The little renderings, the kind of scaling pictures. I
Let's
know I
see.
have it.
It's page 16 of the agenda packet.
oh, the section of the ordinance that shows it?
Yeah.
I can go there
Ooh.
if,
I just think it helps.
sorry, Deb.
Blow that up.
I can either go to the agenda packet or the UDO.
There it is.
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Let me zoom in a little bit here.
So that, I think, encompasses what the second portion that was already there, right? This multifaceted kind of roof lines and heights, right, stepping back. Which is not at all what, was presented to us on this particular project that we had before us. But this is the net effect of what will happen.
Okay, if I'm remembering correctly, was it the hotel has like minimal setback?
Yeah, the swimming pool's basically right up to the property line.
So my personal issue was the fact that there's no setback for a hotel from.
Right, commercial can be like, boom, right there, and but you get a
So-
family product next to a housing product next to a housing product, and all of a sudden it has a completely different standard with less intensity.
So I thought one of the things, and I don't know if Mr. Heller captured it, was establishing a setback for a hotel from the property line.
Which is what he did with the 75-foot,
So
basically.
that's where the 75-foot came
Right,
from.
right,
So
Okay.
it's,
right. So that was, yeah, his idea was to do this 75-foot setback and the community compatibility standards, is that right? And create that going forward. Now,
But it's confusing to me is that, next slide, is it 75 for a hotel, yet I guess the
It's
concept is it's less impact, which is why the 2 stories and 30 feet.
so your house can be 10 bedrooms and 35 feet, but your condos next to it can't be.
Right.
That's what kind of irked me, I guess. And maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. I know we also have the.
Well, I guess
undisturbed
mine
buffer.
was, I got 75 feet for the hotel, the page before, and yet we're 100 feet here. So what is the greater impact, right? What's the busier? To me, it's the hotel, not the,
Right, your commercial, any kind of commercial.
right.
Would be a much more volume than an impact than having in this case, what the applicant put forward for this project was a 3-story multifamily, basically condos, and it would end up at the way it presented about 80 feet at the property line. You know, and the current standard is 100 feet, but even at 100 feet, oh, there it is. Thank you, Jenny. Look at her. She's amazing. Even at 100 feet, and then there's also buildings back here. The garage is on the bottom of your screen, breaking up and then the 10-foot undisturbed area, right?
Talking about here?
Or up there, yeah. North on the top of it. Sorry, I was looking at the bottom where the parking spaces are. Top side, yeah. So he ends up. That blue line is the 80-foot setback versus 100. And what he was suggesting is that these two multifamily buildings, would be
We can't
3
see
stories.
what you're pointing at, Bob. Just let me
No,
know.
sorry. That building and that building are,
These?
yeah, those two buildings are essentially 3 stories, right? The way he presented it to us.
I
Is
mean,
that
that's
correct?
the elevation that he showed.
Right,
yes.
the elevation. So internally, he can have, basically, he can have that 35-foot elevation, but he can't have
3 stories.
a 3-story unit. So I don't know how he makes that work, but. And from the outside, would you even know? I guess you would if you had windows and sliding doors and balconies and things of that nature, right?
Well, and we need to remember it's the average height, not the
Right.
peak.
And then, I guess Megan, to further bring you in, on this particular project, Mr. Howard's text amendment would not be applicable because he already
Correct.
received approval.
Correct.
The only thing that that Submit now has a problem with is if we don't grant him the change from 100 to 80 feet, he's got a project he can't build. And he has to meet whatever other standards with the 2-story dwelling on the property line facing, that was pre-existing, right? Just to have a further confluence.
Repeat that again. I'm sorry.
Okay, so this project that you have up before us right now, as presented, he needs it to be, he needs the 80-foot setback.
Well, I mean, if
Or
you're
he's gotta
saying
redesign
that the fact that he showed one elevation of a building and it was 3 stories and that's as per, I mean,
Right,
as approved, the condition was that it would meet community compatibility.
right.
So
He's got other
the
problems.
portions of the footprint within 100 feet would need to meet the community compatibility.
Right,
which
so he's
means-
gonna have to drop down the roof line or make it 2 stories. not-
Right.
Well, he
Or
can't even
sh-
put the
or
building
shift the
within 100
buildings
feet.
a little bit.
Correct.
The extra,
Setback to 100 feet.
right, he has to move his setback back, right? Now, when currently, what he presented is at 79 feet or something like that, right? Or 81 feet.
Yeah, I mean, this is showing you approximately 80 feet. It's the blue line.
Right.
So
Well, my first thought is the 100-foot wasn't a change. He just,
Right, he built it wrong.
he designed something
Right.
incorrectly.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so he asked if we would be, if we could make a change, basically, right? And so that's the second agenda item, but since it's all kind of tied together with
Right.
what's Howard suggesting, and this is a great illustration of, like you said, the commercial. You got the pool, the hotel, the conference center. It is literally, probably 20 feet from the property line or something? 30 feet? You got a 10-foot
about
undisturbed area.
25. You can see the
That
25-foot line
that personally amazes me that we don't have a setback for
Right.
that. That's just,
Right, it's crazy that it.
I mean,
just-
and, good, bad, or indifferent. So
Right.
one of the houses that my parents owned that I grew up in had a condo go up in the backyard that was 20 feet off the property line. And, having people like
Yeah,
on
you're
their
got a monolith behind.
on their balconies, like looking in. Anyway, we moved.
Okay, so anyway, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
So,
Help me out.
so the question is,
Oh, my brain's fried.
what has he changed that?
Nothing he's changed affects this, okay? What affects this is the current, 100-foot setback, and they have some other problems with this, so we should probably get to that later, but it's a good illustration of
No, I get it.
what's going on. So, so the question is, do we want to accept the change to the community standards that Mr. Howard is suggesting of not allowing stuff to go to 35 feet, making it go 30 feet if it's within, I guess it's 100 feet, right? Mm-hmm. If it's within 100 feet, it can't go over 30 feet tall mean, and can only be 2 stories. And the 2 stories was already existing, so he's just going with what we had. But he's changed the height. And so that portion of it, I don't really care one way or the other about the height of 30 or 35 feet. I do have concerns about future stuff or redevelopment, or a building burns down, let's say, and it doesn't, I used the Currituck Town Center as an example, but there's no houses right next to it, so it really doesn't, it's not a great example. And maybe we don't even have anything in Currituck that could burn down. Food Line, Monterey. That is well within 100 feet of the property line, probably even 75 feet of the property line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's 3 stories. So that, although it'd be kind of hard to burn the brick, but
Oh no,
but it can burn.
it could.
So let's say that went up and went down, it had to be knocked down, whatever, and rebuilt. You couldn't rebuild Monterey Plaza as it exists now. I don't think, with the suggested changes. You might be able to, but because of the 35-foot mean, that has an extra wall to cover up the air conditioning units that are on the flat roof, basically. It's aesthetically, it's designed that way. So that was one of the things that I had a concern with, is redevelopment or something, gets totaled and we have to rebuild it. Timbuktu could go up, and because Rick's building stuff right behind it, that may or may not affect it. That's commercial to commercial, so
Yeah,
it
he's
really
not doing
shouldn't.
dwellings there.
That's the only thing I can think of.
But using what you're talking about, what is to prevent the houses on that back line being 35 feet from the property line, 3 stories tall? Looking in at the condos. What's the difference?
Their height. And just about all of those houses are on pilings.
Though they're all still 35 foot.
35, that's what I'm saying.
It's a apples to apples, but not really. It's Granny Smith to an actually good apple. So,
Fuji.
Fiji, yeah, there you go, Fuji apple. So it's a housing product next to a housing product, but the bulk and scale of the building on a large condo project could be quite a bit compared to a couple 5-bedroom houses.
So it'd be interesting to go back to the original framers. Of the video.
Ask them what they were
I mean,
thinking.
there's an aspect of, I understand the height type piece in the property line because of, I don't necessarily want people staring straight into the bedroom type thing, right? But yet, then we turn around and we got a hotel that
Who's doing just that?
is going to far worse than that without any consideration of the property line. So I guess you were on the board when you approved that. Way to go, Owen.
Nobody read that part.
Anyway,
We only thought there was one.
We're never going to
hotel.
get another hotel.
so I guess the question is, this project's not going to have a 3-story.
He just has to redesign those buildings that are within that 100-foot setback. Those 2 buildings. He's going to have to redesign those, pull them back, or do whatever. The hotel would stay the same.
I know the hotel, right?
Now the thing is, if would he have to come back to us? Let's say we do nothing. We leave it as is. Everything stays the same. We don't approve no changes whatsoever. What he presented to the BOC for his amended sketch plan, those 2 buildings do not meet
The 100-foot.
the 100-foot setback as presented. If he just redesigns those buildings or moves them back, does he have to come back before the Board of Commissioners again? Because it's
I mean, it would just,
basically a different project.
it would depend on the redesign.
I mean,
If we could determine it was in substantial conformance with this plan, then it wouldn't have to necessarily come
Right.
back.
Keep
to
the
the board.
same facade, just move the building back 20 feet
Yeah.
or step it back, right? I mean, really 3 buildings. It looks like that maybe he could shift that building gently a little bit to. So if he has to come back before us, let's say you determine that it is a major change and he has to come back before the BOC for approval. Now, is he subject to any changes that we put in place? Let's say we approve this Howard text amendment and we approve that before they come back to us.
I think, yeah.
Now he may be
He has to
subject
comply.
to the new rules.
Yeah, I
right?
would think so in that scenario.
Right. Right.
But we also, with that, we're still waiting on a
Right, we're
judge.
still in
Yeah.
court. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole myriad
There's a
of other
whole-
things, right? I mean,
yeah.
this could all become moot depending on what the judge does, right?
And do we have a timeline for that?
No, the judge preferred 30 days for the parties to discuss everything, and that would be 30 days from last Monday, so about 3 weeks.
That's gonna be
Okay.
a while.
But clearly, because they're going on, they have, I just dropped the term, they are considered an entity, right? I mean,
They have standing?
we were thinking
They-
that they was going to get thrown out that they didn't have standing. In reading your email, clearly they have standing.
Yes, the judge ruled that they had standing.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I know what I would suggest to them, right, is go with what you got and mod it.
Right. So, yeah, but that's
Because the risk,
right. Right. Okay, so I guess we need to go back to Howard's text amendment. And now that we all understand kind of what the scope of it is, my concern is I don't like the 35-foot to 30-foot.
I'm fine with 35,
And
personally.
yeah, I just don't want to see it affect future stuff that we don't even know that it may affect. And we've seen that happen already.
Well, we've been using 35 throughout
Forever.
Whalehead at a minimum, and, you know,
For all
the
it's
average
35
height,
everywhere.
the average height, and as long as they would stop filling in the lots at the ocean before they went to their 35 feet, I think I'd be all right.
So 2 stories is his change because it's underlined?
Correct.
But it is 2 stories currently, right?
No, this is the community compatibility
Community
standard.
compatibility, right.
So
We're off to-
it was really just
The height.
a statement that said the buildings shall maintain a maximum height of 35 feet within 100 feet of a lot line shared with the existing, which is really not more restrictive than the ordinance
Right.
height
Right.
And
requirements.
practically, 2 stories, 3 stories is, the height is everything, not necessarily the number of stories. And some lots, you can pull off 3 stories and never get above that 35. Some you're gonna have,
Yeah, the mean could put it at
the mean roof line.
37, 38, 40 foot, depending on where they're at.
Right.
So the compromise, why not 2 stories and 35 feet?
And that's exactly what I would be comfortable with, because it's existing now, the 2 stories is. And 35 is existing now. I mean, that is what's in place and has been the practice. And it's everywhere in the county except for 4.
I'm good.
I'm good leaving it 35.
Okay.
2 stories, 35.
All right.
Kevin?
I'm good with it.
All right. And the B was already existing, so.
I'm sorry, did I move too quickly?
B on that.
Yeah, that was already
So that was already
existing,
existing,
yeah.
so we're not really changing anything there. Okay.
I was just gonna make a statement because you had mentioned being concerned about existing development or redevelopment. That's why I had the slide up.
Yeah.
This shows you the applicability of the different design standards. So you can see for the non-residential design standards, the way it applies to existing developments a little bit different than the community compatibility standards.
Okay.
So for non-residential design standards, it says that redevelopment is encouraged to, but not required to comply with the non-residential design standards.
Okay.
The community compatibility standards say that any expansion or alteration that exceeds 50% of the building's assessed value needs to comply.
When you what's the UDO's definition of redevelopment?
It's a good question. Any proposed expansion, addition, reduction, or other alteration to an existing building, structure, or other constructed feature on a lot or site. Redevelopment also includes changes in use to existing buildings as well as modifications to site features such as parking, signage, landscaping, grading, stormwater management devices, or changes to outdoor storage.
Okay, does demolishing and starting over, is that considered redevelopment?
Yeah, let's say they had using Monterey and it burned down, right? And we had to rebuild that. Kind of like we had down the county.
Yeah,
I mean, now that's going to be over 50%.
Right.
I would think. I'm also thinking of because there's a whole rash of houses that are disappearing and much bigger things are coming back in, right?
Yeah.
I think I counted
There's a bunch.
2 on Corolla Drive alone.
That's been way more than that. Heck, I bought one and moved it in Ocean Sands and from Whalehead back in 1998.
Oh, I was on board.
Expanding the tax base.
That's right. Put 150,000 in that house, we made worth more money.
We also have a section about non-conforming structures with respect to setbacks. Structures that do not meet the minimum setback distances for the district where located may be redeveloped or reconstructed within the same footprint, provided all the appropriate permits or development approvals are obtained in conjunction with or prior to any demolition of the existing structure, or with reduced minimum setbacks, and there's some reasons that you can get reduced minimum setbacks.
Isn't that kind of what problems that the Cotton Gin encountered? Is the setback?
Right, yeah, I mean, they didn't meet the major arterial setback on the highway. Correct.
Just curious.
Yeah, which is why I'm bringing it up. So,
Must be done. The screen went off.
so
All right, I'm done.
So that's the big question, and why one of the reasons we're here tonight is you've got kind of conflicting things in the non-residential design standard, and then the community compatibility would trump non-residential design.
Kevin kicked me off.
So I guess my question is, again, and you went right back to it again, and so as long as, let's say, Monterey had to be demolished because it would burn up, they had to get permission ahead of time to rebuild it, but they could rebuild it, what is there, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's fine.
Right, and that's fine. That was my big concern was, if somebody wanted to knock down the town center and do something different there, they would come in for a completely different amended sketch plan as part of the PUD for Corolla Light and blah, blah, blah. So,
I don't want to see us on Facebook.
and that particular building, if that burned down, it doesn't matter because there's no houses immediately adjacent to it, right? So we're good there. James Johnson's the other stuff. Let's think about U and X and R. Okay. So do we have a slide before this, Jenny, that was something underlined?
That was it.
okay.
Those were all of the,
Oh, there it is. It's building subject to these standards with
yeah, this is,
shall be set back 70 feet from the property line, share with an existing family detached dwelling to the maximum extent practicable. That was a maximum extent practicable was something we had a discussion about. What did that mean? And I believe we actually have that in our.
yeah,
agenda.
it's in your, it's in the memo on page 1 of the memo, or page
Yeah.
2 of the agenda packet, I think. There's a note in italics that's probably small.
It's also in there with the planning board discussion.
Yep.
There would certainly be some instances where that probably couldn't be met, but we would work with the developers to
Okay.
meet the setback.
I guess the other thing I was worried about was how it may have affected us, but we can exempt ourselves.
For the county.
Well, for instance, on the property we own across the street from Cements, we had the ABC store, and we were talking about putting a multi-story building there when the bridge gets built as our new visitor center, for instance, and how that property could lay out, because there are houses right behind it from Corolla Bay. So that could affect us.
Just change it.
Yeah, we'll just change it. I won't be on the board then, but
Oh, yeah.
Owen will. All right. So, I guess that's it for Howard's stuff. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
Wow. All right. Thought that was going to take 10 minutes.
Right?
All right. Well, let's take 5 minutes then, since we've got the. Are you good with where we're at?
Yeah,
we're clear enough with
Are
you
we-
guys?
We kind of talked a little bit about the county's text amendment too. Did we have a,
I think with where we went with this particular text amendment, it pretty much negates our text amendment because the community standards will trump it anyway, and it's a lesser extent. It's 75 feet, although his project doesn't apply, right? Or would not apply.
Right.
So he's still stuck at 100, even if we change this. Right. That's the question. So his
well, I mean, I think, and then the question.
positively he can make changes. Negatively, he can say it doesn't affect me. Right. It's one of those deals.
Right, I think that is the
Maybe.
case.
I mean, he can say, "Oh, I'll take the new standard on that." Right. I'll go to 2 stories and I'll go the 75 foot and.
When did he want to reschedule his use permit?
Right. Well, as presented, he's at 85, so, or
Right.
80 feet. So.
But we're still keeping that 100-foot setback in there, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if
That
but with the Howard text amendment, the community standard changes that commercial building to 75 foot setback if he goes 2 stories, 35 feet, right?
Right.
Right, but the request was 3 stories, right, at 80 feet.
Yes, and I'm pretty much guessing that we're not going to give him that.
There's still, yeah.
Right. So. The board, like I said at the onset of this, I don't think any of us realized that when the applicant came before the Board of Commissioners for that process, that it was known to him and his team that he had to meet that threshold of 2 stories. What he presented from a picture show was a 3-story building, but he can't. But we didn't understand that at the time, so he knew full well what he was doing, and was asking for it out of the board. We didn't know. I guess we didn't catch that part. So
It's a lot better this way than
right
when he's trying to get a final on 3 stories, and it's like,
no, right,
you got to take one off.
right.
So is the board withdrawing that text?
I think that's the. I think that is the yes.
Yeah.
Are
I think so.
we able to do that right now? Or?
Beginner 5 minutes.
Well, I just want to make sure we were all clear with
I think it
Jenny.
would need to happen on the next
Yeah.
meeting, which
But I don't
we
think
could
there's
just put on
reason
the
to get into it
consent
Okay.
agenda, yeah.
All right, good. So I will move on, and we're breaking?
In 5 minutes, you will.
Okay.
Maybe 7, depending on how this
Okay.
goes.
Well, maybe 8.
All right, thank you.
You sent me a message.
We're back
Hope you
for
stick
some
to
more
your guns.
Yeah, I got that.
discussion.
I didn't know what he was talking about.
So for those that are just tuning in or were tuned in, the second item this evening was PB 24-18 Currituck County text amendment for Corolla setback. We're going to be not talking about that tonight and actually bringing that forward at a future meeting to remove it for discussion. So now on to upper story dwellings. And we have, oh, Jenny, you're back.
Okay, yep. So we did discuss this at the prior June, I think it was June 17th work session. We didn't get into details too much. We talked about the determination that was issued and that permitted multiple upper story dwelling units in the general business zoning district, which would logically also, I mean, the similar ordinance language is in place for the limited business zoning district, so it also would apply there. And it was interpreted to mean that the maximum gross density in GB of NA in the ordinance was interpreted to mean that there was no maximum density, but staff did note that the land use plan does control. And just wanted to provide that there's almost 5,000 acres of general business zone property in the county and 75 acres of limited business property in the county. And the current options for residential uses in the general business and limited business zones are live work, which typically would be 1 unit, a single family dwelling, which would be 1 unit, manufactured home, which would be 1 unit, upper story dwelling, and an accessory dwelling unit, which would have to be accessory to another permitted principal dwelling unit on the site. So the way it had been interpreted up until the October letter of determination by staff was that upper story dwelling units were limited to 1 dwelling unit. And so what we want to get feedback from the board on is, is that what you want to see is multiple upper story dwelling units in the general business zoning district? And if so, how do we limit those, or do we want to do a text amendment to the ordinance to button this up and bring it back to how we were previously implementing it, which was 1 upper story dwelling unit? I know there was discussion about potentially allowing multiple units above businesses that were split into multiple units, that maybe you have 1 per unit. That was a discussion. I don't have a lot of data prepared for you tonight, but I would certainly be happy to bring some to the board if there were things that you wanted to see.
I guess if we gave you some direction, that would help you bring something back, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess just generally, I did want to kind of touch on, we have general purposes of the different zoning districts, and we have residential-based zoning districts, which include, your single-family zoning districts through the mixed residential, the MXR, which is where you sometimes see some mix of commercial and some more density. We looked at this at the prior work session as well, which shows the Imagine Currituck land use plan transects and the maximum feasible density in the ordinance. And these are with the zoning districts on the left side. This is the maximum density that you could achieve. And so you could see that even in the mixed residential, which would be a district that would have a little bit of density, it's capped at 2. With a conditional mixed residential, you can get up to 3 dwelling units per acre, and in your planned developments, it's 3. So the interpretation could mean that in your general business zoning district, that could become your most dense zoning district. And you can see here, even in mixed residential, the portions that are designated as non-residential are limited to 2 in the full service area and 1 in the limited service area. And just to touch on that just a moment, you're going to be seeing language before you in the next couple meetings, implementing the land use plan terminology into the ordinance, as well as a land use plan update based on the feedback from the board in June. So you can see even in the non-residential areas of MXR, which is the area where we would have some dwellings, it's limited to 2. Then you have your business and mixed-use base zoning districts, which is your GB district, which I was mentioning before, does allow upper story dwellings and the other residential uses that I described. But you can see here that, the district purpose is not really intended for industrial, multifamily, institutional, residential uses are prohibited. So it's not really intended to be the district for a lot of density. Same with the limited business district. So this, I'm not going to go over the conditional districts, but we know what those are. And then the plan development based zoning districts, that's just the overall view of those. But I'm just going to go back to this slide and just, are there discussion that we want to have? Is there information you think you need?
Well, could you go forward to a couple slides where you had the, was it maybe a sand pad or something? Right, that building. So I brought it up, I believe, when we talked about this, like where the Dunkin' Donuts is up in Mayock, you have 4 spaces there, right? 4,000 square foot, 1,500 square foot spaces. What would be wrong with having a dwelling unit over each of those? Just as an idea. So that building, I believe, has 4 spaces in it currently. If you had 4 owners that have worked above, would that be a bad thing? And so I guess that's one example of something. I mean, you've got it in Corolla at the town center where you have, businesses below and apartments above.
There's a lot of good things that can come from something like that. Not the least of which is
workforce housing.
I'm sorry.
Workforce housing.
Well, workforce housing, one. The other one is you have less impervious ground, right? So you wind up with dwelling units that don't cost you on floor space. The big question that I think we would need to address, because if I'm not mistaken, parking isn't reflected with upper units. Like they only have that one parking spot.
Half a space, actually.
And that's a bad idea. So I would suggest if we look at that or we want to do something with that we reach out and touch the parking spaces too.
Yes, that makes sense.
Well, I'll share this with the board. When I was on the Smart Growth Study Commission for the state, we visited down in the landfill area and whatnot of Wilmington, and they were doing neo-traditional storefront, living above it. And they said in a lot of cases, that's the only way you can get a small mom and pop business to locate, because they can borrow the money to build that instead of having a house and a business separated.
And depending on the business, most businesses aren't 9 to 5. I mean, most businesses are, a lot longer than that. And, that's a very good reason.
And they could have children and run upstairs and things like that. So
I don't have a problem with one dwelling unit above one business. But I don't think we need to be looking at multifamily situations above a business. I don't care how big the business is. And that to me is what's concerning and what we need to address. I don't want to see where we don't allow a dwelling above it, because I know we have them out in Corolla. And that's kind of a necessary thing out there if you're trying to have somebody to be your worker. And I can see how the need may present itself here on the mainland, especially if that bridge is built. It's going to change the dynamics. When? Okay.
Just got to cough up $1 billion.
I think we have to craft it so it doesn't get abused.
Right.
Would the board want to see any limits on size? Limits, minimums, maximums?
I mean, like, use Duncan for an example. What are the 1,500 square foot units?
I'm just guessing.
I think they're around that.
Yeah. So if you had, in that case, if you had 4 businesses, you would have 4 roughly, if it's just using 1,500 as a number, for 1,500 square foot, studio apartments up there, or actually you probably get a 2-bedroom at 1,500, because you can do it in Corolla at the town center. They're like 800 square feet. But the question becomes, how much do you do on a property, right? So is it if it's 1-to-1, your density actually supersedes any density that we have now currently. It's more than 3 dwelling units per acre, or maybe not.
I think that's what I was trying to look at that particular property and see.
Yeah, I just pulled a number out of my head, just kind of walking through them and seeing them. That's 1,000, 1,500 square foot is probably, they're somewhere in that general vicinity.
You could say the floor space equal to the store space.
Right, but let's say it's a
30,000 square foot.
right,
building, and then they have like a
yeah. I
one
mean, you end up
apartment split. With
well,
a
and that that's basically what Flora was originally asking for. Was they wanted a town center deal with that exact product, and it was something we didn't have, and I don't think any of us at the time wanted to see that here specifically, but it is in line with what we're talking about, basically. Although, we need to set a cap on it of no more than.
Definitely.
I thought that's what we approved with the false track.
The Fost we had originally, they had restaurants on the bottom
Yeah.
floor, but that's PDM. It's a little different than GB.
Right, but I mean, they presented it with
Yeah.
commercial down at the bottom, and then it changed, so we have to be careful about approving a big project
Right.
that changes in the middle.
Yep. So that's but GB is a different animal entirely, but they could use.
Could still do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Could you cap, let's suppose that the pharmacy came in that was, I don't know, I'm not very good at the spatial thing, 20,000 square feet. Is that too big for a pharmacy?
That's awful.
Probably
big.
10.
Okay, 10, let's suppose it's 10,000 square feet, so I don't have any concept about 10,000 square feet.
Yeah.
I don't think we would want a 10,000 square foot apartment that they divide into little bedrooms for all their workers. I think maybe you could cap the living space, could you cap the living space to say 2,000 square feet for 1,500 square feet per unit?
You could.
Could you do that?
Or you could cap the number.
And the number. So in that case, let's say it's Walgreens. It's a standalone on a corner, which they don't really usually do. Well, they do that, but it's a standalone. You can just say you can only have a. In this case, it's a business, a building. You get a apartment above it, a dwelling unit, and it shall not be bigger than 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, that's what I think
that what
that
you're-
would, yes. I think that would be,
What you're doing, looking at GB, you want to limit the number of stories too, because you don't want a 3-story.
Right.
Right. I think you keep it at 2.
so if they've got their pharmacy on the bottom, then the apartment that they could build on their second story.
I think mainly you're going to see this with like strip malls.
Yeah, basically that's why I use it.
Well, that Dunkin'
The
Donuts.
Dunkin'
is a great
Donuts is,
example.
and that's probably what we're going to see
4
more
units
of.
that are 1,000, 2,000 square feet that want to put something above
Right.
it.
But it could be abused if we don't address it. They could build a 10,000 square foot and put a bunch of little apartments on the second floor if we don't.
Probably cap the number of units, that
Right.
So, I
square
mean,
footage and the number of units.
So if you're talking about density, the Duncan site is about 2 acres.
It's about
So if they
what?
had 4
About
units.
2 acres.
So if it's 4 units there and they had 4 residences above it, then you would be
2 dwelling units per acre.
2
right?
dwelling units per acre. Yeah. Which
And
is
if they had 2 stories above it,
I think. Well, that's the other thing we're talking about was
Double that.
capping it at a 2-story. Yeah, put a rooftop limit on it. So it has to be a 1-story unit above it. Access from the rear. Blah blah blah. Be interesting to see how many people dodge
Building, what if you
the
got a lot
drive-through.
that can fit 2 buildings on it?
Right.
You've got 5 acres, 6 acres.
so you have just 1-story unit.
In that case, like let's just, since we're talking about Duncan, I think the thought process is if we allowed it there, you could have a 1-to-1, one unit, per one dwelling unit per business, and in that case, cap it at 1,000 square foot per apartment or whatever you want to call them per dwelling unit, and you max it out at a 1-to-1, or you don't allow that, or at a 2-story height. You set the height at, what would 2 stories be, 24 feet or something, 20 foot.
Well, you could have a taller business unit and then
Right.
your
Yeah, you could do
dwelling
12-foot
maybe
ceilings
not
or
as
14-foot ceilings in the
tall,
business unit.
so, yeah,
So,
that, the height may not be a big issue there.
okay. But no, I would say, is there a designation for, I guess there isn't. So we have a 35-foot cap on height, but it can still be a 2-story unit, right? That's basically what we just talked about with Howard.
Within 100 feet of the lot line, if that
Right,
is approved
but
by the board.
as a picture, right, in your mind.
Yeah.
So this building that's up here currently on the screen in front of us is a 1.5 basically, right? That's just attic space above it to create a roof line. If they went up with another wall, you would end up with,
Go to the next building
There's a
down.
building right to the right.
yeah, that's it.
That was
It's
the
got a
old
cupola.
bank building.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. But anyway, that's a 2-story building basically with an appurtenance. Bring back Lori.
So the board doesn't want to look at density necessarily, just number of units.
Well, I think the two go hand in hand. We haven't had a project come before us yet that is a big, small mall type project, right? But if that did come before us, then we've got to think that through a little further, certainly, because now you can end up with 20 dwelling units on, let's say it's a 10-acre property and they want to develop it. You could end up with 15 or 20 dwelling units on it.
But we don't have anything in GB about dwelling units?
Density.
No, so
Density.
we have that certain types of dwelling units are permitted in GB, which is another thing I wanted to talk about, which is,
Maybe
Are
we
we
should do a max gross density there.
right, possibly.
Yeah.
And 3 is the max that we have in the county right now, right?
3 is the max in any district, yeah.
But what could you tie it to workforce housing? They must work in a business there.
You could, I mean, force,
I think
Well,
that would be certainly the intent. I don't know if we can.
I would not recommend.
I wouldn't, you
Doing
would
that.
muddy it.
There, you couldn't.
Okay.
Oh, you got fired yesterday. You're evicted tomorrow.
Yeah, that just wouldn't work.
But
How
I
do you
think
know you were
having a
fired?
max gross
The tour,
density
your key didn't work downstairs, and when you
in
went
the
back upstairs, it
UDO
didn't
like
work
this,
either.
Yeah, I mean, I
There you
think,
go,
and I
fine.
think you should probably look at the max densities in other districts when you're determining for GB, because you get 3 only with rezoning right now.
Well, how about if the economy goes busted and they say, well, we want to turn these retail stores into apartments? Are we going to address that? Could that be put in to make sure they couldn't do that?
Well, that wouldn't be, it wouldn't be upper story dwelling units, but, I mean, that's the other thing, is you want a viable business underneath
Right.
the
Right.
dwelling unit.
Right. So that would be they shall not be permitted on the bottom floor, basically, right?
But yeah, I mean,
we'd have to just
they're
put
by
some language.
definition, they're not permitted on the
Okay.
bottom.
All right. So that's been addressed. So
Now. Yeah, I think it's a little bit complicated because of the fact that there's such an array of residential uses that are permitted in GB.
right.
So,
It's certainly worth further exploration. I think it helps solve the problem for businesses that want to locate here, or maybe they could, it certainly could help us out in workforce housing. And realistically, if it's a landlord situation where you're renting to the owner of Dunkin' Donuts, for instance, or pizza joint, they're gonna control who's going in their apartments anyway, or upper story dwelling units, unless they're selling them outright.
then you have your land use plan transect, like, the ordinance requires that projects have to be consistent with the land use plan.
Right.
And this is something that you'll see with the ordinance amendment that's coming before you at your next meeting or the meeting after that. That the transects and the sub areas limit density. Whereas, the zoning district's the zoning district, but if you have that zoning district and you're in G1, low density growth, but your general business, do you want to have the same amount of density there as you would if you were in the G2, G3, or G4 transects that we consider like a full service area?
I personally would think so. And the reason is you're only going to end up with a few units there realistically. You've got 4 or 5 unit, retail spaces. You're only going to end up with 4 or 5 potentially, or 4. Given the acreage, it's going to affect the density anyway, and what they're allowed to have. So I don't personally have a problem with it. It's a business. It's supposed to be busy. It's supposed to look a certain way. I mean, you can certainly design the building around it. And you're not going to have, with a couple of units above it or 4 units potentially, a ton of traffic going out of the residence itself. Yeah.
The businesses are typically significantly greater traffic than there are.
Right.
The residents.
Right. You're just not going to feel it. Right. You're not going to. So even if it's down in your neck of the woods, Selena, you're not going to really notice it.
Right. Right. I mean, we've got a lot of.
Yeah.
Now, well, the one that she was showing in the picture, there's several businesses there. And, there's several 2-story buildings in that area.
Right.
On both sides of the.
Yeah. You wouldn't even know that there was residents there almost. Except for the beer flag outside or something.
And Bill was mentioning, did we want to cap to just overall a total number
of
of
allowing
upper
this
story dwelling units? And then
for a particular project
for
or
any
in the county?
project, anywhere. Like there's a max number.
Well, use the Dunkin' Donuts site. Let's just say it's on an acre. I know it's a little bit bigger than an
There's
acre.
2, yeah.
So that would be 4 would be all you could get.
Mhm.
Because you gotta have parking for the business.
Right.
I think
It'll be self-limiting.
right. I think if its design is workforce. I mean,
That's
targeting workforce housing, right?
Who's going to end up in it some way, some shape, or form.
Then I'm not. That's a way of getting it again on the same footprint as business, et cetera, and
Yeah, it's not costing you.
I'm not sure the density is really going to hurt us like.
No, like
other
doing a neighborhood or a
projects might
multifamily
be,
project
right.
or right.
But I don't know if we shouldn't put a cap of the number.
I'd
How do
say
you-
4.
How do you cap it? What, 4 per acre?
Mm-hmm.
Well, going with this one, if you were again,
They would have.
I don't
8.
know that you'd get 4
Yeah.
in there anyway, because again, the parking for the residentials above, which I think needs to be
And-
expanded.
And if they're not on sewage, they've got a septic issue to
Right.
contend
So
with.
I think it's going to wind up self-limiting
Yeah.
largely. But whatever, we could cap it.
Jenny, what do you think?
If you had 10 acres, you could have 20 dwelling units above, say, 4 individual buildings on the property. Is that something you want? I know they still have problems with septic and.
What would you do if they subdivided 10 acres in the acre lots?
Well, they couldn't. They'd have to rezone and.
Yeah.
It's a little more to it.
Yeah.
I was just throwing a worst case scenario thing.
Uh,
The Dunkin's your ideal situation.
Right. Well, one worst case scenario is what you really want to think about, right? What's the, and.
Well, I mean, you
But
look
what-
7-Eleven, right?
Look at Mayotte Pizza Kitchen. I mean, it's a similar to the Dunkin' style for businesses.
But there's always somebody that's gonna find a way to get around the system.
I mean, that's a good, I mean, think about Moyotte Commons. If every unit in Moyotte Commons had an upper story dwelling unit, or,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, because there's 6 in Mayotte Commons.
Mm-hmm. somewhere close to.
Six
But
or
again,
seven.
I
There's
think we
lots of
need
Again,
half.
heights in that area.
in the grand
Currituck
scheme of
commercial as
life,
well as.
it's nothing.
It's not, it's insignificant.
Well, and here's the thing, again, in my commons, you're limited on, land, sewage, septic, whatever,
Parking,
right? That's,
or-
yeah, that would have to be redesigned. So it's new projects coming forward, they're gonna have to be designed to meet whatever. They're gonna have to, it's gonna have to make sense with the project.
And a large project like that, right now, at least would need a special use permit as a
Right.
shopping center
Ah,
or a subdivision, however that was
Right.
gonna be permitted, so.
But
I
two
I
per
think we
acre.
talked about limiting to only 2 stories, is that right?
yes.
But what if you
definitely.
had like an office building with two office floors, you couldn't have an upper story dwelling unit on the 3rd
I
floor?
don't think,
So we would change the definition of an upper story dwelling unit then, because we currently define it as, right here.
Second floor or higher.
Second floor or higher, wait.
So
Yeah,
by
but that-
definition, you could have a business on the bottom, an office on the second floor, and a dwelling unit
On the 3rd
on
floor,
the 3rd floor.
as long as it's under 35 feet
but you could pull off what you did, 8-foot ceilings.
and really short people.
The problem I see with that
That would
is,
be ugly.
that is, to me, I think that could be abused and that office space
point.
turned
Oh,
into a
instantly.
dwelling unit.
You've already got it going on, crawl.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Yeah.
if you just change it to occupy the second floor of a
Roll it
building,
off.
I think that's a
Yeah.
Okay.
safeguard right there.
Second floor.
Or a higher needs to go away.
Yeah.
And just since you brought up Corolla, a lot of Corollas in planned unit developments.
Yeah.
And density is assigned through the sketch plan.
Right.
So this wouldn't necessarily apply to,
Yeah, I'm not thinking it's a
PUDs.
Corolla. I'm thinking about
could
a PUD
apply in Corolla Village in areas where it's not in a PUD, where there's some general business zoning though.
thing. And it may not be a bad thing, like, between the water plant and Timbuktu, I think it's U or X, whatever that is, there's a lot right there. That would make a great something like that, or across the street where you go into, Shipwatch. That other R is for sale. But anyway, Corolla, there's not much left, so it's not, unless it's redeveloped, you're just not gonna have that problem there. And it goes right to what actually, one of the land use plans, the ACTs calls for trying to find, workforce housing, I believe.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm unclear where we are on density.
So are
2
we.
per acre.
We're gonna need more discussion for sure.
Okay.
How's that? But I think generally what I've caught is we are very interested in the idea of allowing upper story dwelling units, limiting those buildings to 2 stories, bottom floor commercial, second floor residential, no 3rd story on a building of that nature. And then we need to have further discussion about how many units to allow for density per acre.
But also a cap on square footage of those dwelling units.
Right.
Yeah, nobody
Which
have
would
a
be
10,000 square
regardless
foot
of
apartment.
How big
Yeah.
the space is at the bottom. You shouldn't be able to take a 10,000 square foot building and do a 10,000 square foot living space above it. I
Right.
think that needs to be.
Now,
you imagine
what
the
about
market value
the
on
fact
that?
that the ordinance allows a
Backside is
dwelling?
nice.
It's some sweet room.
The ordinance allows a dwelling on GB, so are we still good with having a dwelling and upper story dwelling units on a property? Or a dwelling and an accessory dwelling and upper story dwelling units?
No. I'm not.
No,
doing
I think
that.
for what we're talking about here, I think what I've heard is that we are all okay with the idea of an upper story dwelling unit over a business, not an accessory, not of this, none of that, right?
Yeah,
So-
because we do allow that currently.
Okay.
We allow
Well,
all the,
if this, then that, right? If you do,
Yeah.
if you do an upper story dwelling unit, then you can't have.
so we allow all these things currently in GB and LB. And then the other question will be, do you want to limit the density in LB?
Yes.
I definitely think we need to limit the density because I think it could be abused. I know there's a belief that it'll take care of itself, but I feel like if it's going to take care of itself, why not go ahead and put it in writing.
But you need to, yeah, you definitely need to make sure that you cover the eventuality that if it's a project that comes in Mayock and it can tie into the sewage, now you got a density change, or you don't, but it makes it easier, right? They don't have to deal with septic, that septic limits what they can do, how much parking lot area, what all that stuff, right? So yeah, it definitely needs to be really gamed out before December 1st, meeting in December, before the first meeting in December. If you want us to tackle it, if you want the new board to tackle it.
We can look at maybe some options for limiting these other types of residential uses when you're
Perfect.
doing more than one upper story dwelling unit or,
Okay. I think
or
that's
just one.
I think that's reasonable. You can have either or, right? And we probably want to encourage more of an upper story dwelling unit because it might make the property as a whole look better than having a manufactured home with this or that, the other, right? Going forward.
Okay, I think that's, well, I'm not in charge here, so.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was great. Good discussion.
That gives us some direction though, so we'll work something up on
Okay.
that.
Thank you. See, now you're back in charge. All right. Private wastewater. Who's getting this one? Is this Rebecca or is this Jenny? Rebecca's been quiet tonight. It's kind of weird.
Great.
Right? So this really though, but this came out of a discussion I think the two of you we had, right, about terminology and private package plants and.
Yeah, it's come up a couple times.
Yeah.
I think at one meeting, sorry Rebecca, here I go.
Please.
Commissioner Payment had mentioned that he thought we had prohibited package plants.
Yeah, we had
in the
talked about it at
county,
some
and
point.
there was, in like 2021, there was a text amendment initiated by the county, but it didn't move forward.
Okay.
And that amendment was basically going to require, let me grab it actually. New subdivisions to be serviced by a centralized wastewater system of a major utility. Centralized wastewater system of a major utility owned and operated by the county, or an on-site wastewater system that complies with Albemarle Regional Health Services standards. That didn't move forward, and I had mentioned the reasons previously. There was a project that was coming in for rezoning, and it was unclear whether the sewer was going to work out. And that was potentially going to be needed as an option.
Okay.
So, and when it had come up a few times, so we put it on the list to discuss. What does the board want to see with respect to wastewater and whether, currently the ordinance says that multifamily development, plan unit development, and plan development has to be connected by a centralized wastewater system. But there's this provision, and you just recently saw Elon Vacations project that came in, which was a plan development mixed, where the county engineer had previously approved a decentralized wastewater treatment system. And here's some parameters here on your screen as to what that was supposed to be designed for. So basically just trying to understand what the board wants to see with respect to the types of wastewater required for certain types of development, whether it's all new subdivisions or certain types of development. Rebecca, if I've missed anything, please. I think so. Okay. The package plant was a kind of a specific, it's kind of like a specific type of wastewater treatment. I'm certainly not going to school you on that because I need to be schooled on that.
Well, and that's
firstly,
that's the crux of the problem, right?
Yeah,
So we commonly refer to a package plant when we were talking, and really, if memory serves, it was around Eagle Creek, right? We had that we called that a package plant or a private system, and we've had so many problems with it. Just as a general reference point for me as a commissioner, that's kind of how I referenced it, and so I think that was part of our discussion, was getting rid of these things because we've had so many problems with them. Corolla's had its own issues. They've had issues there. We had to take over the one down in Grandy. There's been talk over the years about the board taking over that.
I don't know if Eagle Creek's a package plant. Eagle Creek was a different type of system with its own
It's a private
unique-
system. It's a
with
private
its own-
system.
With its own issues. Some of the package plants that we have are Modoc Commons, which is a county-operated package plant. And then Carolina Village is a private package plant that's operated privately.
And then we got one down for the water park,
The
right?
water park is a small system, and I don't know that it's exactly a package plant.
Right. So I guess the thing that's cleaning up is wastewater operation and what the nomenclature they're in. So what's a package plant, private system, does it matter?
Or just what.
So I think the problem with
And then
private systems,
what you would like to see, whether that's no more private systems,
well, heck, we can't even, we hired a contractor to run our system and it didn't work. So, it's a mess.
We've already got a mechanism to take care of it.
Yeah.
Because we create a service district when they're approved, that if they get in a state of failure, you can activate the service district and take it over. That's there.
And then sell it.
Yeah.
Well,
Are we talking about going forward or what we already
yeah,
have?
well, so, okay, we talked about, and I was talking with Rebecca about this recently, and that's how we ended up with it tonight, because we have a package plant that we had delivered for Mayock, right? And like I said, the nomenclature terminology probably means something different to all of us. So, and what a package plant is or isn't, private systems that have package plants in them. You can have Eagle Creek, which has its own treatment system, but isn't a package plant, but it's a sewage treatment plant, and all the same. And so we've got all this mix of things going on, and we had a lot of problem. Look at that. Jenny's ready.
Well, one thought occurred to me that since Albemarle Health is the governing body locally, whatever their nomenclature description is what we ought to be speaking. So I think we need, number one, we need to align to them because that's our first line of defense. And we say package plan, they go, no, that's not what that is. That just adds, I agree with you, it is confusing.
But you also got state from the standpoint like Eagle Creek. That's DEQ.
Right, but the
not
nomenclature,
Meta.
correct, but I would suggest to you that the language that Albemarle Health uses on Eagle Creek is going to match up and is going to align with state DEQ.
So Jenny, were you getting ready to say something after you take a sip of water?
I don't recall. I don't know.
I thought you got ready to say something. So the question is, I guess, really, do we want to get away from private sewer systems and have it either be county run or septic? Basically, right? Wastewater treatment systems, period, just as an umbrella term. Do we want to handle that? And
So,
We're talking residential, right?
or commercial. I mean, so a big neighborhood comes in, they want to do a private system that's a package plant on site. The fourth one, on site wastewater system. So they do their own site. We've seen them fail again and again and again and have problems again and again and again. So
We get the phone calls.
right, and we get the phone calls. Eagle Creek's a prime example of that. They, how many hours and hours and hours did we spend on Eagle Creek here that was out of our control completely. So it's a crappy business.
Going forward, if we require houses to have their own septic system, we won't have to worry about it.
Which is what you said all along.
What I've been saying for years, that would help with a lot of our problems.
Yes, it would.
Help with overgrowth of certain areas. If everybody had to have their own septic system, we wouldn't have to worry about it. And I certainly don't want us to take Eagle Creek.
Right.
We see how expensive all of this is.
Right.
And to take on something like that, no way.
Okay, so
Another one example, use the city of Elizabeth City. $40 million just to get theirs up to speed.
Or Edenton, who puts it out in the river.
33.
So does Elizabeth City.
No, it was Edenton.
Okay.
Elizabeth City,
Elizabeth
right
City
there by
does.
the causeway.
Yeah.
Just up the river from,
Got
never
big
mind.
pumps.
I
Well,
know it's creating all kinds of
Edenton
images.
just did
They
it
dumped it
about a
last
week
week.
ago.
Oh, good.
So-
The only concern is, by doing something like this is, will we push them away from areas that's got systems now? And they go out and look for open farmland?
Well, it'll be green.
to-
You'll have plenty of nitrogen out there. So-
That's my concern, that we'll push it into non-developed areas.
What, as planned, you mean?
Development.
I
Well-
will tell you, and again, speaking with Ralph Hollowell at length, and his, one of the raging concerns, in fact, I think it's Bass Knight's fault in the first place, if I'm not correct, none of this land, quote unquote, was good for septic systems.
Right.
For 100,000 homes.
Some
Fast forward, we're not at 100,000 homes. I think that's an
fan-filled
exaggeration,
back
Katie.
trench systems.
So when, in talking to
We're only at
Ralph,
90.
Ralph's comment was, from an environmental perspective, you're better off with one plant treating collective waste than lots of individual systems.
Right.
And his concern was, potential septic failure, whatever. Our practical experience clearly with Eagle Creek is,
On a private system. Yeah.
give us a septic system any day, our own private septic system. So, I mean, there is a pro and there's a con, right?
So what are we here for, Rebecca? You just want to know about if we wanted to get rid of package plants, right? Or we didn't actually
What?
adopt any language for that, right?
I think we just wanted to understand when you said package plants, what you were referring to, whether you were.
I'm like, Paul, let's go to Albemarle Regional Health.
Right. Well, as far as the nomenclature, terminology, yeah, perfect. All right.
Then come back and
Well, it looks like it's right here.
address it.
Bill's trying to
Do
say
away with
something.
Private systems, that's the question.
Yeah. Do we want? And that's the other side of the discussion is: are we going to get rid of private systems or not? I mean,
Define private
for-
system.
Yeah,
I was
I
gonna
think
say
that's-
define it.
Yeah.
Residential,
Yeah.
yes.
So a system that's not operated by or owned by a private company.
Right.
So it would be,
Well,
if
yeah.
there was a.
we would have to
a-
hire them. We would have to hire a private company to screw it up
Right.
instead of.
But I don't
Okay.
think
But-
we should
So a county enterprise, essentially.
commercial.
Right.
I think, I mean,
Does
Even
that
commercial.
include this decentralized, like the Elon Vacations example,
Right.
where it's a decentralized area where, or a wastewater plant where there's no available sewer,
Right.
and they did a multifamily project, and they basically did large septics
Right.
with a little bit
and then you said the.
higher treatment.
H2OBX.
The water park has their own, right?
The water park does.
Plus down the county, the southern end of the northern Outer Banks, we don't have sewer down that way. So, I mean, I think if you do that, limit
So-
growth down there,
Right.
commercial growth.
Which is good or bad?
Commercial growth, I don't want to limit commercial growth along the highway.
Well, until you can't. That's the other rub is you can't. Let's say we decide to build a plant and then we identified some land we could actually build a plant to handle sewage and do it. We would need residential and commercial both to support the cost of maintaining that infrastructure. I'm right on that, right? Basically, you kind of need both.
I don't think that's where the problem we ran into with.
No, just talking about Lower Currituck.
No, I know, but I think that where you run into problems is flow. If you don't have enough flow, you wind up in trouble.
Right.
So if you build a plant and if you build it, businesses will come. You can do that for a season, but if you don't start getting flow in there, then you're going to constantly be in violation. And that's how we got into trouble with Moyoc. We built it, business was slow to come. Then we were got wrapped up in putting houses on the system. I'm sorry?
Feeding it dog food.
Right.
Right.
Well, that whole system was terrible to begin with. So
I don't want to see us get into any more sewer
10
management, running of
like to
plants
see us
and
have
anything else.
Still.
But But we can go ahead and refer to them how the health department.
Right. So we do, so do you want to, let's put this off till December.
No, let's just at least talk about it.
2026, I'm good with that.
In all seriousness, I mean,
Yes.
if we're gonna make a decision, this board has spent
A lot
of time trying to understand and familiarize ourselves with problems. And I think we need to, because we have a grasp of the problems and we live through the phone calls from those problems, I think we need to give staff direction now.
Okay.
The question comes to enforcement, and that's the issue with Eagle Creek. They've known for a long time they had to do something with the collection system. The plant itself is fine. It operates like it's supposed to. But the state has never really held their feet to the fire.
They never,
And
The
we
state's
haven't,
never inspected.
and they've
Well, look.
never held our feet to the fire on Moyock.
well, the other thing on that, talking about Eagle Creek system, that was built in 2001. In 2023, they made them clear all that land around the plant that had been there for 22 years. Made them clear all those trees. If you go and play golf, the 9th hole, there's like acres that was all wooded
Right.
that they made them clear out. It was okay for 23 years, and then they just recently made them
Well,
clear
that's
it out.
because they actually were looking at it.
They went, yeah, 23 years later.
All right, so I'm lost again. Well,
Private system for individual homes. I've lived in my house since '79. It's been cleaned out one time.
Dr. John Sledge said for years, if you want to
I've been a
control
proponent of making
density,
people do that every
don't
5
go
years.
to centralized sewer.
So
Do away with it then.
what about decentralized? Like Jenny was talking about with that, having a massive, basically septic system like they have down. Is that unacceptable?
That's not what
University Park has.
I think it's fine for University Park. I mean, to me, that's a private system,
But it's
right?
on the soil condition.
Yeah.
None of us are wastewater experts.
Right.
And if I could suggest that we actually ask somebody who's let's get Ralph or somebody from Albemarle Health in here and talk to us about the pros and the cons because
Yeah.
the law of unintended consequences, we're going to make a decision that won't be us, but potentially the next board rues that decision. And we need to stop making mistakes, which is what we get when we try to figure out something that we really don't know what we're doing. Speaking of Moyock, how's Moyock doing?
Moyock. So the flow has not been diverted as of today. We are waiting on a chemical to arrive so that we can divert flow. So we have everything in place so we can properly treat.
Do we have a timetable on the chemical?
I had a voicemail this afternoon that it has been identified, and hopefully I'll have a call tomorrow to let us know when it will be here.
So soon?
Yes, soon.
There's lots of little kids in China trying to make it right now. I'm sorry.
I didn't say that for the record.
All right. So I think that's a great idea, Paul. If we could get some discussion. Do you
And
want
the-
us to do that, or what do you got, Jenny?
We can do that. I mean, and the answer may be to not do anything. I think we just wanted to make sure that
Right.
us not acting on something was
Right.
in conflict with what you all
Okay,
wanted.
because the other aspect of that I think is a good thing is Camden made a horrendous call. And when they did their moratorium, they
Oh.
blamed Albemarle Health. And he would love an opportunity to probably speak to us.
All right. Well, let's have what? How about if Rebecca makes
Yes.
a telephone call,
Yep,
reaches
yep.
out, and has her people call their people. Okay. Oh, a mind map. Guess that's our next subject. Sand mines. Everybody good to jump into that?
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
Go.
So there was I guess, an email or an inquiry from you, Chairman, regarding sand mines and potential limiting the areas in which they could be permitted or the manner in which they would be permitted. And I believe that the county attorney sent an email back out, kind of giving a couple of ideas as to how you could potentially limit those. One would be requiring conditional rezoning with the same set of standards that you have. So a conditional agricultural zoning, and that would be a legislative decision of the board, not a special use permit by the
That
board.
was that was the biggest thing was, if we limit the number of them, or how can we limit the number of them? Because once it's quasi judicial, barring any contravening evidence, they're gonna get the use permit. And
Correct.
that was, my big thing, and it's out of a discussion with Commissioner Jarvis. So,
Right, and
yeah.
I have the mine map. I didn't know if you wanted
Oh,
to
perfect.
look at
Yeah.
where the mines are in the county, and this, there's a legend here. Let me use my hand.
It's a lot of dots.
Got to get to Currituck.
Oh, look at that. Look at the hot spot.
So
Holy
there's
cow.
a legend here. So the blue is pending mine permits at the state.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the sand lot that was recently before you is pending. The green, like the darker green, are the active mines. The Bayview sand mine back here is active. The Griggs Pit. This is the Foster Forbes that you saw a couple of years ago. The yellow are released, which I tried to talk to somebody at the state just to confirm my understanding of that. My understanding is it's no longer active.
But could they go back to being active?
I'm not sure.
I think if they've been released, they're out
When
of
they're out of
They're
it,
M. Shaw,
permits. Yeah.
and they got to start over
they'd
if
have
they
to
wanted to
start completely
reactivate.
over.
Let's see.
Is there a way you can take the yellows off?
No, I couldn't figure it out if there is. I wanted to.
Clap your
but,
hands, it might turn green.
There's about there's less than 20 active and pending applications with the state.
How about the north end of the county?
And that,
Yeah, let's go up there.
and do we have any idea how many acres are involved in mining?
I don't have the acreage total, but I can try
Because that
to-
would be
try
an
to get that
interesting
for you.
number as well.
Yeah,
So Jenny, I think Harry could probably get this.
he could. Yeah,
Yeah.
he sent me something, but it wasn't the updated stuff. Yeah, we could do that. Brumsey Mine, Countryscapes, Balance Mine. Those are active, or these two are.
Mm-hmm.
This one's inactive. Sproul.
Well, so you got all the mines.
Yeah, and there's probably more to come if we don't do something.
Could you show, just out of curiosity, Dare County?
I mean, the lack of mines.
Okay.
Got 3.
3, 4, 3.
Pretty active.
3.
4. Well, it's nice that we're shipping all our
Supplying.
sand down there and building up
Yeah.
Dare County.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they're digging up Currituck, the northern.
just wanted to live in the northern
Outer
Outer Banks.
and take.
Northern Outer Banks sand.
That's right.
The data is here on the website as to the acreage of these sites and affected areas.
Oh, okay.
Okay, quick, total that up.
What's that? Yeah.
So really, what after the last mine, we went through that process, and it was pretty obvious that nobody was chomping at the bit to approve a mine, yet another one, and we had to basically. So that's what prompted my discussion with Megan was, can we make this legislative rather than a use permit, so that if we don't feel like it's a good fit at the time or the area, that we could basically deny it legislatively rather than being hemmed in by use permit restrictions.
Can we completely do away with them?
You could disallow the use.
I think that's what
That's what you
But the
suggested.
problem you're gonna have with that is you got these farmers up here in the northern end that they might need to sell 5 acres for a mine where they're gonna redevelop the whole farm.
Or a solar farm.
I mean, that's the issue, either or.
I don't think you can completely prohibit the use, but you can certainly limit where it is or change the type of decision that's required, but you can't strictly prohibit.
So part of the rationale behind my question was, I don't know how much overall acreage the lower Currituck is, captured in this, and how many acres of it are in or permitted for mining. But when I look at Shawboro, and we're going to be looking at somewhere around 1,500 or more acres of solar farms in our community within a real short distance of one to the other. And the latest one was East Ridge East, which possibly implies a west is coming. I would argue, well, it'd be curious to know what our mine per acre is here in Lower Currituck versus our solar per acre in Shawboro. So I agree with you, being overrun with anything is not a good thing, because then that's the whole character of the neighborhood and of the area. But there are other areas in Currituck where there's a propensity for some activities that, because that's where they are convenient to put in, Moyoc and Summit Farms. I mean, that is, and so I think if we want to do this, we need to look at some other things too. What was the other
So are you
industry?
arguing that for solar farms, it be conditional as well? Is that what you're saying?
I think whatever we think could be,
Okay,
rather than by right.
okay.
There was another industry too that I thought, we talked about mines, and there was something else. It's because we started so early. Anyway. But it'd be interesting to know some of the math, right? Some of the numbers. And take out the decommissioned ones.
Well, that's, that's what's really sad is they take a piece of dirt, they mine it, and there's nothing left to do anything with it. So you got this,
Hole
Why
in
do you
the
say
ground.
that?
I mean,
and I'm not trying to be.
It just seems to me like, okay, so when we flew over Currituck and without wind, we flew around, like you could see how many mines are out there, and old mines, and there's typically nothing around them. Like when they take 20 acres and they mine 15 of it or something, whatever the number is, and then what's left, there's not much use around it for anything. It's just it's open space. I guess it's habitat for animals or whatever. And in some areas you'll go and they'll mine it, and they may have a neighborhood, and the mine becomes the the BMP.
So for example, I know Williams Mine in behind Hardee's. Is that behind Hardee's?
Well, there's 2 back there, Thrashers and Williams.
Right. Well, Williams Mine, he's in the process of, I guess, decommissioning it. But they have an entire, because I saw the prints on it, they have an entire grading plan. I mean, that almost came before us as a subdivision
Right.
based on that. So, I mean, the normal, I guess it's not the Currituck way, but normally with these borrow pits, they wind up being a major recreational feature
Right.
of a housing development. And,
And we're not seeing that. That's why I bring it up. You're not like to. It'd be nice to see it in conjunction with some future plan, I guess, if we wanted to look at it that way. That okay, you're going to have this mine, you have to save enough real estate to do something around it,
what's that?
rather than the other thing is preserving open space. That just means they don't have to cut the grass around it when it's done, and just trees growing up, and then there's just this mine hidden back there that nobody knows about. That's
Because it is in fact, when
There it
Christine and I
is.
first moved to Hampton Roads, we lived on a lake that was a borrow pit.
Right.
It was a 26-acre lake.
So in that context,
wrong
it's,
place,
it
'cause
makes
it's
sense to
above-
have it.
To the north of.
And
And-
maybe that should be part of
Right.
the, okay, so let's get way out there. We have a decommissioning plan for solar, right? At the end of their useful life, they're gonna A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Do we have the ability to require what a mine will look like when they decommission it? In other words, it's not just gonna be a rectangular hole in the ground, it's going to be with features that we could use to evaluate whether or not it's a feature that's beneficial to the county.
Well, when Thrasher was approved, he had a plan for decommissioning it and had to slope the sides of the pit and everything, which they're doing now.
Right.
And he's still several years away from
Right.
digging out, but
But
He
Billy
was-
Sproul was in the middle of that whole thing, and that's part of how they got the measurements screwed up with
and looking at the map, they got Elbow
farms.
Road
There's Thrasher.
Farm in the wrong place. It's north of South Mills Road.
Right.
Yeah. Minor details.
So do we have do we require a decommissioning or whatever we're gonna call it from sand mines? Do we require them to have a plan for what they do when?
Yeah, there's reclamation plans for
Okay.
ponds.
So that's already a thing.
But
Yeah.
that reclamation plan is I want to say it's a 3-to-1 slope to the water's edge. It's just so you have a stable hole in the ground
Right.
when you're done. It's not can do anything with it.
Right.
It's just, the 3-to-1 gets you,
I don't think anybody
reduces
mentioned that.
excessive
In
erosion.
our last one we just saw, they said the decommission. They mentioned that they were going to turn it back into a habitat area or open space or whatever, right? And that was it. And it's just done. And now you
Right.
just got this hole. in the
Exactly.
ground. So, which maybe is bad, maybe it's not bad. I don't know, but it, like you said, they become in other areas. You see them become, or some of them are water parks. I went to one in Canada. You could jump off a cliff into the thing because it was a
There was
rock
one in
quarry.
Florida that was a water ski. It had a cable that you would get on and you'd ski all around this, and that's exactly what it was.
So there are other things to be done with them, but anyway, I guess, I don't know. So I don't feel like we're going to get anywhere with this tonight, though, at 8 o'clock.
No, so
I don't.
we didn't want to do
So,
conditional zoning or?
Did we want to have any real discussion about this, as far as, like you said, changing it to a legislative decision or conditional? But again, you're back to, it's just a use permit, basically. When you're going to condition it, and we've already got a million conditions that got to go on it, and the state oversees it anyway, ultimately.
Right, but it's what and again, it's late. We have a philosophy is get as much sand out of the smallest amount of land we possibly can. That is the philosophy, right? That all of the sand mines, that's what they got permitted with, that's what they came to us with. And this is okay. And maybe it's, we need to have a vision for what we can do with these and turn them into a feature for the county, or, from a development perspective, that you're on a nice big lake, property values,
Right.
it's not a bad idea. Anyway.
Okay.
And that still allows revenue to be generated for the farm, for the, whatever. But at the end, I think it sets up an end game, an end goal.
Well,
to shoot for.
Thrasher's just, memory serves me correct, they had a housing development with the golf course built around it, and they were going to have a over the waterfront type of restaurant because they wouldn't need county permits and stuff
Okay.
at that time.
Right. Okay. Well, that one's going to need further discussion at another date. January? Yeah, 26. All right. What are we doing with quasi judicial this evening?
Mainly what we wanted to talk about was removing public comment from
Yes.
the procedure. We've talked about it before, but never really, I don't think got clear direction on whether that's something that y'all were interested in. If you are, it would have to coincide with a UDO text amendment with an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, the procedure section of the meetings. It's my recommendation that it be removed as it is not material, substantial, competent evidence, which is what you are required to consider in making a decision for quasi-judicial hearings. It kind of muddies the waters. It always creates issues and questions. That would be my recommendation.
I thought that's what we were doing.
Okay.
I mean, we've talked about it, and in conjunction with that, getting more information to not only the people that have come before, the applicant that comes before us, but just in general, that this is, it's quasi judicial. It is not it's a public hearing only in that you can listen in, basically, right? And
Right.
you can participate if you have reason to participate. If you have standing
Exactly,
to
if
be
you have
involved.
standing, yes. And I created the brochure, which we put on the website, so hopefully that will be helpful for people. But if that's something y'all would like to see, then we'll get on that. And I'll do an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, and planning can work on the text amendment to the UDO.
Okay, well, you good with that, Kevin? Oh, I know you have.
I think it makes people feel like they don't have a say, and I know that they have to have standing, but if somebody's coming before and they say, my property floods or something like that, and they have proof that it floods.
But doesn't that is acceptable?
Right, I've let them speak as a witness.
Because they witnessed it. They are credible.
But what I'm saying, if we say we're not going to have public comment, it's sounding like we're trying to shut the people down. When somebody gets up here and they say, well, you don't need to approve it because I don't like you, it's up to the chairman to say, well, I appreciate you coming forward, but that's not the type
But this
of...
is not, so it's not public comment, okay? The public is not actually permitted to comment. It's witnesses may participate, and perhaps we could add in something, call public comment something else, because what it is witness statements or
Yes.
something to that effect,
Well,
right?
if rename it then,
Right.
but
Yeah.
we should never...
That's what we had discussed.
Right.
Yeah, so we can rename it to make it clear individuals with personal knowledge that have facts. They testify to facts that they have personal knowledge of. As long as it's not expert testimony, some kind of technical knowledge it's required, and they don't have the expertise, then that is fine. That they can. So we certainly can add. I'd have to think about what to call it, but we could put that in replacement of public comment.
But yes, but when someone comes up and has testimony or has a statement or whatever, right? Just like we can't question an expert witness that steps up here, right? In other words, we can't proffer ourselves as an expert over and trump their expert testimony. In a case where somebody from the community comes up and says, well, I heard da 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 da, isn't it the applicant's job to, I mean, clearly hearsay, and I get all
Yeah,
that.
that would be hearsay.
But that testimony or aspects of that could be challenged by the applicant,
Absolutely.
in which case
And
we
I've
just
asked.
sit listening to it.
Yeah, so if somebody comes up and testifies to something,
Right.
whatever it is, then the applicant or the applicant's attorney can certainly cross-examine
Correct.
that witness as they should,
Correct.
and that would all be part of the evidence that y'all would be hearing.
And I think the beauty is, I understand what you're saying, right? Somebody can come up and give, and Bobby, you've done it before. Well, thank you for that, but unfortunately, we can't take that into consideration. For people like being able to share their feelings and what their experiences are. Experience would be considered factual for the basis of testimony, but I think you're right. we need to be more, we do not want to discourage people from participating in our process where they have input, legal and legitimate.
And I think I discussed with Megan, just because we hear an expert witness doesn't mean we have to believe what they're telling us. You don't have to believe everything that you're hearing an expert say.
I don't think that's.
But that can be challenged.
Right.
And as our experience on this board is, it gets
Yes, it certainly can be challenged, especially if there's no contradictory evidence
Right. You don't have a
contradicting
reason
what that expert says.
Right.
So I'm hearing that maybe change the wording. It's not public comment. It's for people who have personal knowledge of facts
Personal testimony.
that's relevant to the matter.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe even factual personal testimony.
Okay, well, that was easy. I think. Now I'll have to explain that again for the next 7 years to the next person.
Yes.
All right. All right, very good. Recommendation of an award with the Whalehead Club, South Production Well, and site improvements. That's a, guess you need to enlighten us on something on that?
I do. So this is the recommendation of award for a deep well for the Southern Outer Banks water system. We held one bid and unfortunately only received 2 bids. This is a formal bid. And then held a rebid. And the low bidder is AC Schultes in the amount of $1,668,824. Staff recommends award of the project to AC Schultes and also requests delegation of contract signature authority to the manager.
How deep is this well? 15, 20 feet?
15 or 20 feet? Yeah. I'm not sure of the
but it's
depth.
5 miles wide. Who were one of these companies the original bidder?
Yes,
I'm
they both.
assuming-
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, we have to have 3.
No.
Right.
Who bid the first bid of the 2?
We don't open those, but if there's not 3
Got
bidders,
it,
we don't
okay.
open them.
Okay, so, any more comments, questions, concerns? We're just stuck with 1.6. All right, well then, since it's my district, I guess I'll move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right, consent agenda. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Looks like it was all fairly normal, routine business. Can I have a motion for approval, please? Motion for approval, please.
And they,
Second.
All right, Miss Kitty, 1, 2. Kevin's always
All
late
of
to the
the
game.
above.
All right. All in favor? Would someone like to adjourn us?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.